He didn't lose everything all at once. That's what nobody tells you about collapse. It doesn't arrive like a wave. It comes in quietly, one thing at a time, until the morning you wake up and realize there's nothing left to hold on to except a 7-year-old girl who still believes her dad can fix anything. Nathan Holloway had 36 years of proof that life doesn't care how hard you try. And yet, when the call came, a strange number, an offer that sounded almost criminal in how much it paid, he made the kind of decision that desperate men make when love is the only math that still makes sense. He should have asked more questions. He should have walked away. He didn't. And that choice changed everything. If you've ever fought alone for someone you love, this story belongs to you. Hit that like button, leave a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. And stay with me all the way to the end. The pink slip came on a Tuesday, which felt like an insult on top of an injury. Nathan Holloway had worked at Meridian Logistics for 9 years. 9 years of loading dock paperwork, of inventory audits, of arriving 20 minutes early and leaving 20 minutes late because the overtime padding wasn't charity, it was survival math. He had been good at his job. Not spectacular, not the kind of employee who got his name mentioned at quarterly meetings, but solid, reliable. The kind of worker that companies quietly depend on until the moment they decide they don't need him anymore. The HR manager, a woman named Patricia, who had the permanent expression of someone delivering news she rehearsed in a mirror, slid the envelope across the table without making eye contact. "The company is restructuring," she said. "Your position is being eliminated across 3 regional branches." Nathan looked at the envelope. He didn't pick it up. "I've been here 9 years," he said. "We understand this is difficult." Patricia had clearly said this before. Recently, probably. "There's a severance package outlined in the documentation. 2 weeks per year of service, so 18 weeks total. HR will walk you through the benefits continuation options. My daughter starts 2nd grade in September." Patricia blinked. That one landed differently than she expected. Yes. We understand the timing is... It's fine." Nathan picked up the envelope. "I understand." He didn't understand, but he'd learned a long time ago that saying "I understand" in rooms like that one was the fastest way out of them. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for 11 minutes. He knew it was 11 because he watched the clock on the dashboard, some dumb part of his brain convinced that if he just waited long enough, something would reset. The seconds ticked forward with a complete indifference to his situation that he found almost impressive. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Did you remember the pharmacy closes at 6? He put the truck in reverse and pulled out of the lot. His mother, Carol Holloway, was 63 and looked 70. The years hadn't been soft to her. A lifetime of manual work, restaurant kitchens, hotel laundry, a decade of night shift cleaning at an office complex that permanently wrecked her knees, had left her with the kind of body that carried pain the way other people carry weight. Quietly. Constantly. The rheumatoid arthritis had progressed over the last 2 years to the point where some mornings she couldn't open her hands. The medication helped, but the medication cost $420 a month after insurance, and the insurance situation had become complicated in ways Nathan was still trying to untangle. He'd switched her to a lower-tier plan 6 months ago to save $70 a month, and he'd told himself it was temporary, that he'd fix it when the budget had more room. The budget never had more room. He picked up the prescription. He bought groceries, the practical kind, the kind that could be stretched across multiple meals. He drove back to the duplex on Callaway Street where he and his daughter and his mother shared 1,200 square feet that felt smaller every month. His daughter, Lily, was 7. She had her mother's nose and his stubbornness, and a laugh that had the quality of something genuinely surprised by joy, which Nathan considered the greatest gift he had ever been given and also the thing he was most afraid of failing to protect. Lily's mother, Diane, had left when Lily was 18 months old. Not dramatically. No screaming, no ultimatum, no memorable final confrontation. She'd simply decided that the version of her life she wanted didn't include a baby and a man who worked logistics. She'd moved to Portland. She sent birthday cards sometimes. Lily had stopped asking about her around age 4, which Nathan privately found both a relief and the saddest thing he had ever witnessed. He had been a single parent for 5.5 years. He was used to the weight of it. What he was not used to was the particular vertigo of losing the income that made the weight manageable. Carol was in the kitchen when he got home, sitting at the table with a cup of tea she'd been nursing for the better part of an hour based on the color of it. "You're quiet," she said. "Long day." She looked at him the way mothers look at their children when they've decided not to push, but haven't decided not to worry. "Lily's at Mrs. Ferraro's. She wanted to stay for dinner. I said you'd pick her up by 7. "Okay." "Nathan." He put the pharmacy bag on the counter. "They let me go today." Carol set down the tea. The kitchen was quiet, the refrigerator humming, a dog barking somewhere on the street outside. The ordinary sounds of a Tuesday evening continuing completely uninterrupted by the fact that Nathan's life had just shifted in a fundamental way. "Oh, sweetheart. Severance is 18 weeks. I'll start applying tomorrow." He said it efficiently, like a plan, because making it sound like a plan was the only way he knew how to keep it from feeling like a disaster. "The rent's covered through next month. I'll figure out the rest." "You always say that." "I always figure it out." Carol looked at him for a long moment. She had the eyes of a woman who had spent decades watching people she loved make promises they meant sincerely and then struggle to keep. She didn't say anything else. She reached over and put her hand on his, just briefly, her fingers stiff with the morning's pain but warm. That was enough. Hot. The next 3 weeks were the specific kind of exhausting that doesn't show on your face but lives in your chest. Nathan applied to 47 jobs. He heard back from 11. He had 4 phone screens, 2 in-person interviews, and received 0 offers. The logistics sector, it turned out, was contracting. Everyone was restructuring. The word restructuring began to feel like a synonym for, "We changed our minds about needing you." He picked up 2 weeks of temp work through an agency, warehouse inventory, 40-hour weeks, $12 an hour, which was exactly 60% of what he'd been making and covered exactly 60% of what he needed to cover. He did math constantly, not with a calculator, not with a spreadsheet, just in his head, all day, an ongoing silent calculation of what was coming in versus what was going out, versus what could wait and what absolutely couldn't. The mortgage on Calloway Street was rent. He'd never been able to afford to buy. And the landlord, a man named Gerald Pitts, who owned 7 properties in the neighborhood and maintained all of them with identical indifference, had a grace period of exactly 3 days before the late fees started stacking. September arrived. Lily started 2nd grade at Eastbrook Elementary in shoes that were half a size too small because Nathan hadn't noticed until the morning of the first day, and by then there wasn't time. He ordered new ones that afternoon, the cheapest pair in her size on sale, and they arrived 4 days later. He didn't sleep well. He hadn't slept well in a while, but now the not sleeping had a specific flavor to it. That particular 2 a.m. wakefulness, where you lie in the dark and run numbers through your head until the numbers start feeling personal. Carol's medication was the one thing he refused to compromise. Everything else could bend. The medication couldn't. It was at the end of the 3rd week, on a Thursday night after Lily was asleep, and Carol had taken her pills and gone to bed, that Nathan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and a cup of coffee that had gone cold and found the listing. It was on a niche employment site he'd never heard of before. Someone in a forum had mentioned it, the kind of site that handled private household staffing rather than traditional employment. Live-in positions, mostly. Personal assistants, estate managers, specialized caregivers. The listing was spare, almost aggressively sparse, as if whoever had written it was deliberately avoiding anything that might attract the wrong applicant. Live-in personal care assistant. Immediate placement. Private residence, rural Connecticut. Applicant must have experience with physical care, medical equipment, and unpredictable schedules. Strong temperament required. No prior caregiving certification necessary. The right candidate will be evident from their character, not their resume. Compensation. $9,500 per month, plus full room, board, and comprehensive benefits package, including dependent coverage. Nathan read it twice. Then he sat back and looked at the ceiling. $9,500 a month. That was more than he'd made in his best year at Meridian. That was more than double what the temp work paid. That was enough to cover Carol's medication, Lily's school expenses, the rent on Calloway Street, and still have money left over. Real money, the kind that created a margin instead of just filling a hole. The phrase strong temperament required gave him pause. So did the right candidate will be evident from their character. These were phrases that suggested the position had been filled before and hadn't worked out. More than once, probably. He clicked the application link. There was a single text field that said, "Tell us why you'd be suitable for a demanding position with a difficult employer." Nathan looked at that for a long time. Then he typed, I'm a single father. I've been handling difficult without backup for 5 years. I don't quit when things get hard because I don't have the option. If that's the kind of person you're looking for, I'm available immediately. He hit submit before he could reconsider. He got a response at 6:47 the next morning. A phone number, a name, please call and ask for Margaret Hale, estate manager, and a time window between 2 and 4 p.m. He called at 2 on the dot. Margaret Hale had the voice of a woman who had managed complicated situations for a long time and had developed a professional calm that was not quite warmth but not coldness either, something precise and measured and honest. Mr. Holloway, thank you for calling promptly. I'll be direct with you because this position doesn't benefit from anything other than directness. I appreciate that. The person you'd be working for is Vivian Sterling. You may recognize the name. She paused briefly. She's the founder and CEO, or former CEO, depending on how you look at it, of Sterling Dynamics. She's 32 years old. 14 months ago, she was involved in a skiing accident in Colorado that resulted in a spinal cord injury. She has been paralyzed from the waist down since then. Nathan said nothing. He was listening. She is not an easy person to care for, Margaret continued. I want to be very clear about this because the position has turned over several times. She's intelligent, she's demanding, she has opinions about every aspect of her own care, and she does not respond well to people who either coddle her or treat her as diminished. She also, frankly, tests people. She's waiting for them to leave. When someone shows signs of leaving, she accelerates the process. How many caregivers have you gone through? In 14 months? 7. Nathan absorbed that. What's the longest anyone stayed? 3 weeks? And the shortest? 1 dinner. A brief pause. She threw a plate. Was anyone hurt? No, she has very precise aim. It hit the wall about 8 inches to the left of the previous caregiver's head. Margaret's voice remained carefully neutral. I am not telling you this to discourage you. I'm telling you because it is better that you know before you arrive than after. I have a 7-year-old, Nathan said. I've been hit with a juice box from across the kitchen. I can handle thrown dishware. There was a short silence. Then Margaret said, with what might have been the edge of a smile, the position is live-in, Monday through Saturday, with Sunday as a personal day, though emergencies may require your presence. Your daughter and dependent parent would be covered under the health benefits package if you choose enrollment. The estate has a guest house that would be your private space. Separate from the main house, 3 bedrooms, fully furnished. Your daughter would, of course, be welcome to stay with you. Nathan sat very still. He was doing the math again. Benefits covering Carol's medication. Lily having a room. His Sunday free to take her to the park, to the library, to wherever she wanted. When would you need me? Monday, said Margaret. Can you be there Monday? It was Thursday. That was 4 days to put his life into some kind of order, to make arrangements for Carol, to tell Lily that things were changing. Yes, Nathan said. I can be there Monday. He told Lily on Saturday morning, over pancakes, which he made on weekend mornings whenever he could, because it was a ritual they'd established when she was 4, and she still considered it something close to sacred. We're moving? Lily sat very straight at the table, her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Not permanently, just for a while, like living somewhere new for a job. But my school? You'd transfer. Eastbrook's not the only good school in the state, Bug. Lily put her fork down. She was 7, but she had the particular gravity of a child who had learned early that when adults talked about changes, it was worth taking seriously. Is this because of the job thing? Nathan looked at her. Yeah, the job thing. Okay. She picked up her fork again. Will I have my own room? Your own room, 3 bedrooms. Lily thought about this. Can I bring the lamp? She meant the lamp on her nightstand, a cheap plastic thing shaped like a rabbit that she'd had since she was 3, that he'd bought for $4 at a yard sale, and that she treated like an artifact of profound personal significance. Yes, he said. Absolutely bring the lamp. Okay. She ate a bite of pancake. Is the person nice, the one you're taking care of? Nathan thought about what Margaret had told him. 7 caregivers in 14 months. A plate thrown with precision at a wall. I don't know yet, he said. I think she's had a really hard time. Lily considered this with the philosophical seriousness of a second grader. People who've had a hard time are sometimes mean because they don't know how to say they're sad. Nathan stared at his daughter. Mrs. Ferraro says that, Lily added. Mrs. Ferraro is very smart. She gives me the good fruit snacks when I help clean up, Lily confirmed and went back to her pancakes. The Sterling estate was 40 minutes outside of Hartford, at the end of a private road that wound through 3 miles of dense Connecticut woodland before opening onto grounds that were, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary. Nathan had seen pictures of places like this in magazines left in waiting rooms. He had never actually driven up to one. He kept his expression neutral as the GPS guided him past a stone gate and along a gravel drive lined with mature oaks toward a house that managed to be enormous without appearing ostentatious. A federal-style manor in cream-colored stone with tall windows and a slate roof, surrounded by grounds that stretched far enough in every direction that you genuinely could not see the edge of the property. Lily pressed her face against the passenger window. Is this a castle? It's a house. It's a very large house. It is, Nathan agreed. Margaret Hale met them at the main entrance. She was 60 or so, neat and capable looking, with gray hair cut practically short and reading glasses perched on top of her head. She had the manner of someone who had organized difficult situations for decades and had developed an immunity to being rattled. Mr. Holloway. She shook his hand firmly. And this must be Lily. Lily was looking at the front door, which was wide and arched and flanked by stone urns full of late summer flowers. Does a princess live here? No, Margaret said. A CEO. Lily appeared to consider this equivalent. Margaret showed them the guest house first, a separate structure 200 yards east of the main house, connected by a covered path. It was warm and comfortable inside, with more space than the entire Callaway Street duplex. A sitting room, a proper kitchen, 3 bedrooms, and a bathroom with a tub large enough that Lily immediately started calculating whether it was big enough to be a swimming pool. It's not, Nathan told her. I could try. You could not. After Lily had claimed the bedroom with the window seat and Nathan had carried in the last of the bags, including the rabbit lamp which went on the nightstand immediately, Margaret walked him through the main house. It was a house designed for someone who moved through it under their own power, and then modified, imperfectly, for someone who no longer could. Wide doorways had been retrofitted where narrow ones had been. A lift had been installed on the staircase that was functional but clearly an afterthought. The bathroom on the ground floor had been rebuilt entirely for accessibility. These accommodations had the quality of adaptations made under difficult circumstances. They were practical, and they were everywhere, and each one was a quiet record of how much had changed. Miss Sterling prefers the east wing, Margaret said. Her bedroom, office, and therapy room are all on the ground floor now. She works remotely. She maintains a significant advisory role with the board of Sterling Dynamics, though her formal position has been complicated. Margaret chose the word with care. She keeps unusual hours. When she's working, she doesn't want to be interrupted. When she's in pain, she doesn't want to be coddled. When she needs something, she'll tell you. And if she throws a plate? Margaret's expression didn't shift. I would appreciate it if the dinnerware survived, but I won't hold you responsible for what you can't prevent. When do I meet her? Now, if you're ready, she knows you're here. She's been aware of your arrival. Margaret paused. I'll say this once, and I'll say it plainly. She's frightened. Not in a way she'd ever admit to, not in a way she'd recognize in herself. But the way she drives people away? It's fear. She's afraid of needing someone who won't stay. Nathan nodded slowly. Are you ready? Let's go. Right. The East Wing office was at the end of a corridor lined with framed awards, industry recognitions, photographs from events that had the polish of professional achievement, Sterling Dynamics at various stages of growth, a woman in her 20s and early 30s building something from nothing, the visual record of a career defined by drive and precision. Nathan took all of this in as he walked and said nothing. The office door was open. Vivian Sterling was at her desk. She was smaller than he'd expected. Not physically small, but the chair had a way of making people appear compressed, as if it were in conversation with the room around it. She was sharp-featured, dark-haired, pale in the way of someone who hadn't spent much time outside in a year, and she was wearing a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and reading glasses that she did not remove when he came in. She was looking at a laptop screen. She did not look up. Mr. Holloway, she said. Her voice was cool, articulate, the voice of someone accustomed to rooms listening when they spoke. Sit down. There was one chair available. Nathan sat. She kept her eyes on the screen for another 12 seconds. He counted, not out of irritation but out of a kind of professional curiosity. And then she closed the laptop and looked at him. Her eyes were gray and direct and had the quality of a person who had long since stopped filtering what they thought before it showed on their face. Margaret says you're a single father, she said. That's right. How old is your daughter? 7. And you brought her here. She goes where I go. Vivian studied him. There was nothing warm in it, but nothing hostile yet either. It was assessment, pure and simple, the look of someone deciding whether to trust the weight of something to a surface they weren't sure about. I've had 7 caregivers in 14 months, she said. Did Margaret tell you that? She did. Did she tell you why they left? She told me you make it difficult to stay. Something crossed Vivian's face. Not quite amusement, not quite offense. Something in between. That's one way to put it. She folded her hands on the desk. Her hands were elegant, unhurried, the hands of someone who had learned to do everything from the waist up. I want to be very clear with you, Mr. Holloway, before you settle in and have your daughter unpack her things. I am not interested in someone who is here because they pity me. I don't want gentleness for its own sake. I don't want to be handled, and I will not tolerate being talked to as though my brain sustained the same injury my spine did. Are we clear on that? We're clear. I have specific routines that I will explain and expect followed with precision. I have a physical therapy schedule, a medication schedule, and a work schedule, and all 3 of them matter to me. When I'm in pain, I will tell you what I need. I will not perform gratitude for basic care, and I will not be grateful in ways that make you feel important. Do you understand the distinction? You're saying you'll say thank you when something is actually worth thanking me for, not as a social reflex. Vivian paused. That's precisely what I'm saying. That's fine. I don't need constant reassurance. She looked at him for a long moment. There was something shifting in her expression that she immediately controlled, a brief recalibration of whatever she'd expected from this conversation. What do you need then, Mr. Holloway? To do the job well, and to get back to my daughter by dinner. She eats in the guest house? Unless you'd prefer otherwise. I eat alone. It came out flat, almost defensive. I've always eaten alone when I'm working. Then we're compatible on that. Another silence. Vivian reached for the laptop and opened it again, which Nathan understood as dismissal. Dinner is at 7, she said without looking up. I eat in the study. Margaret will walk you through the preparation requirements. I have preferences. Read the list she'll give you before you touch anything in the kitchen. Understood. He stood. He was nearly at the door when she spoke again. Mr. Holloway. He stopped. The last caregiver lasted 3 weeks. Her voice was even, factual, almost bored. He was the longest. Before him, 4 days. Before that, 2 weeks. I'm telling you this not as a warning, but as information. You'll leave too. They all do. She said it without drama, without self-pity, without any inflection at all, just a statement of what she believed was a settled fact. It's better if we both acknowledge that from the beginning. Nathan turned back to face her. She was looking at her screen. Okay, he said. She looked up at that. She'd expected something else, a protest, a reassurance, a promise. The single syllable seemed to catch her slightly off guard. Okay, she repeated. You've told me your perspective. I've heard it. He held her gaze. I'll tell you mine when I have something worth saying. He left before she could respond. The first week was, in the most clinical sense of the word, a battle. Vivian Sterling was a woman who had built a company from a concept in a borrowed conference room into a $200 million enterprise by the time she was 29. She had done this through a combination of intelligence, will, and an almost absolute intolerance for mediocrity. She had opinions about everything that affected her life. She had opinions that were specific, argued, and usually correct. She had opinions about food. This is overcooked, she said on the second morning, about eggs that Nathan had prepared exactly as Margaret's written instructions specified. Soft scrambled, 2 minutes on medium-low heat. Tell me how you want them. I just told you, not overcooked. Tell me the specific temperature and time and I'll hit it. She looked at him with that gray-eyed assessment. Lower heat, a minute 45. Pull them when they look almost done. Got it. The next morning, a minute 45 pulled early. He put the plate in front of her. She ate half of them without comment. He counted that as progress. She had opinions about the positioning of her chair at the desk, 3 inches from where Margaret's notes had described, which meant Nathan spent 20 minutes on the second afternoon with a measuring tape until he found the exact point where her posture shifted from tense to tolerable. She had opinions about the temperature of the house, about when the curtains were opened, about whether he knocked before entering rooms or simply announced himself at the doorway. She preferred the latter, she informed him with crisp impatience, because the sound of knocking was apparently associated in her nervous system with hospital visits. Fair enough, Nathan said, and adapted. She was waiting for a reaction. He could feel it in the way she watched him after each correction. A kind of coiled expectancy, anticipating irritation or deflation or the quiet tightening of someone deciding this isn't worth it. She'd driven out 7 people this way. She knew exactly which pressure points to hit and how hard. What she hadn't accounted for was a man who had spent 5 years negotiating with a small child who had her own powerful opinions about how eggs were cooked. He didn't tell her that. It didn't seem like the right moment. Lily met Vivian on the 4th day. It was an accident, technically. Nathan had walked Lily through the main house to show her the exit to the garden. The guest house path was muddy from overnight rain, and the house route was drier. And they'd come around a corner into the East Wing corridor at the same moment Vivian was coming out of her office. The 3 of them stopped. Vivian looked at Lily. Lily looked at Vivian. The wheelchair existed, acknowledged by neither, which Nathan thought was probably the most natural response either of them could have managed. "Hi," said Lily. Vivian said nothing for a moment. She seemed genuinely uncertain, which was the first time Nathan had seen that expression on her face. "Hello. I'm Lily. My dad works here." "I know who you are." Lily tilted her head. "I know who you are too. You're the CEO. Former CEO. What's that mean?" "It means I'm not at work anymore." Lily considered this. "My dad got let go from work too, before this." She said it with the guileless directness of a 7-year-old reporting a fact, not an accusation. "He was sad about it, but he made pancakes extra so we wouldn't notice." Nathan wanted to say something but could not identify what. Vivian looked from Lily to Nathan and then back to Lily. "Did the pancakes work?" "Kind of," Lily said. "But I knew. Kids usually do." "Are you going to go back to being a CEO?" "I don't know." Lily nodded seriously. "My dad says you're having a hard time." She paused. "I think you're going to be okay, though." Vivian was very still. "Why?" "Because you have a really nice house," Lily said, with the complete logical confidence of a 7-year-old. "If you have a nice house, you have lots of chances." She walked past and through the corridor toward the garden door, leaving Nathan and Vivian standing in the hallway in the particular silence that follows a comment that is both naive and somehow profoundly accurate. "She has your eyes," Vivian said, finally. Nathan found his voice. "I'll keep her out of the East Wing." "You don't have to do that." It came out quickly, and then she seemed to hear how quickly, and her expression reclosed. "Just keep her away from the office when I'm working." "Of course." He moved to follow Lily. Behind him, Vivian turned her chair back toward the office. "Mr. Holloway," she said. He stopped. "She's not wrong," Vivian said quietly. "About the chances." He didn't turn around. "No, she's usually not wrong." He went to find his daughter. The second week brought the first real test. It wasn't the criticism of food or the corrections about routines or the silent mornings when Vivian was deep in work and barely acknowledged his presence. Those were manageable. Those were, he'd come to understand, just the texture of her, the way she moved through the world since the accident, the armor she'd built piece by piece through 14 months of hospitals and recovery, and the slow, terrible revelation that the life she'd had was not coming back unchanged. The first real test was a Tuesday afternoon when the physical therapist, a compact, efficient woman named Dr. Patel, concluded a session and Nathan came to help Vivian transfer from the therapy mat back to her chair. She hated this part. Nathan had learned this in the first week, not from anything she said, but from the particular quality of her silence during transfers, the way her jaw tightened and her hands gripped, and she looked at a fixed point on the wall as if by concentrating hard enough on that specific spot, she could will herself somewhere else. "I've got you," Nathan said, which was what he'd been saying. "I know you've got me," she said. "I don't need the narration." "Sorry." She was repositioned, chair adjusted, and she sat for a moment with her hands in her lap and her face turned slightly away. Nathan was tidying the therapy room, moving equipment back to its places, when she spoke. "Did she tell you about Marcus?" Nathan didn't know who Marcus was. He waited. "My fiancé," Vivian said. The word came out flat and careful, like she'd tested its weight before putting it down. "Former fiancé. He left 3 months after the accident." She was still looking away. "He was very kind about it, very reasonable. He said that the life he'd expected was no longer the life we were going to have, and that he thought it was better to be honest than to try to maintain something out of obligation." She paused. "He was right, technically. I can see that now. He was right." Nathan put down the resistance band he was coiling. He was silent for a moment. "But right doesn't mean it didn't hurt." "No," she said. "Right doesn't mean that." "Who else left?" She turned to look at him then. A direct look. Assessing. As if checking whether this was a therapist technique or a genuine question. His face must have answered her. "The board restructured my role while I was still in the hospital," she said. They were very thoughtful about it. They offered me an advisory position. They said it was so I could focus on recovery." Something moved through her expression that wasn't quite bitterness and wasn't quite grief. Something older and heavier. "I built that company. I wrote the initial pitch deck in a 1-bedroom apartment in New Haven at 3 a.m. I recruited the first 6 employees personally, and while I was learning how to use a wheelchair, they replaced me with someone they'd already identified. They'd been planning it." She looked at her hands. "People say that what happens after a crisis shows you who really cares. I used to think that was a cliché." "It's not a cliché," Nathan said. "It just sounds like one because it keeps being true." She looked up at him. "I had a wife who left," he said simply. "Lily was 18 months old. Not a crisis, not an accident, just she decided she wanted something different. People show you who they are when things get hard." He picked up the resistance band again and finished coiling it. "The ones who stay after that, you know they mean it." He turned to put the equipment on the shelf. Behind him, Vivian Sterling said nothing. He heard the quiet sound of her chair moving toward the door. He kept his back to her, giving her the privacy of not being watched. 3 weeks in, Nathan called Carol on a Sunday afternoon while Lily was at the main house garden. Vivian had, with characteristic indirectness, mentioned to Margaret that the garden was available to the child whenever the weather permitted, which Nathan understood as the most gracious gesture Vivian Sterling was currently capable of making. "How's the medication holding up?" he asked. "Fine. The new coverage is better than I expected." Carol's voice had that quality it got when she was pleased, but didn't want to seem like she was making too much of something. "The copay is almost nothing." "Good. How is she?" Nathan looked out the guest house window at the garden. He could see Lily crouched over something in the flower bed. A bug, probably, or a stone. She was deeply serious about whatever it was. "Complicated," he said. "Is she mean to you?" "She's difficult. It's not the same thing." He thought about that. "She's had a bad year. Multiple bad years, really. She's waiting for me to give up." "Are you going to?" He watched Lily stand up, holding something small in her cupped hands, definitely a bug, and examine it with complete absorption. "No," he said. "Good," said Carol, and then, because she was his mother and knew when to leave things where they were, "Lily sounds happy." "Lily's always happy when there are things to investigate." "She gets that from you." Carol's voice was warm. "You always had to understand everything. Took things apart to see how they worked." Nathan smiled, just slightly. "I'm not taking anything apart here." "No," said Carol, "but you're figuring something out. I can hear it." After he hung up, he sat for a while with the phone in his hand, watching the late afternoon light cross the guest house floor, and thought about what she'd said. He was figuring something out. He just wasn't sure yet what it was. The month turned. The Connecticut woodland outside the estate windows went from the last green of August to the first yellow of September, then to the deeper colors of early October. amber and burnt orange, and the occasional fierce red of a tree that had decided to go down swinging. Nathan learned Vivian's rhythms the way you learn the weather patterns of a specific place. Not through a manual, but through the accumulated experience of being there, paying attention, adjusting. He learned that she was sharpest in the morning, between 6 and 9, when the pain was manageable and the medication hadn't worn the edge off her thinking yet. That she did her best work in those 3 hours and she knew it, and any interruption in that window was the one she'd resent most. He learned that the afternoons were harder. The nerve pain that lived in her lower back and radiated into her legs, a cruel paradox. The persistent sensation in limbs that could no longer move was worse in the afternoon. She managed it without complaint mostly, but there were ways it showed. The set of her shoulders, the shortening of sentences, the way she'd stop mid-thought sometimes and go very still, as if she was waiting for something to pass. He learned not to ask if she was okay in those moments. She'd tell him what she needed. He'd been told that on day one, and it was true. What he hadn't expected to learn was that she read constantly, not work reports, not industry analysis, but actual books, fiction, and history and memoir. Whole stacks of them from the estate's library that she worked through in the evenings with a focused intensity that made him think reading was one of the last things that still felt fully under her control. He hadn't expected to learn that she could be funny, not in a warm or easy way, but in the dry, precise, slightly unsettling way of someone who has observed human behavior closely and noted its absurdities. When Margaret came by on a Thursday morning with a report from the household management company and described a billing error of $600 with 20 minutes of elaboration, Vivian watched the entire performance and then said, "Margaret, I once fired a VP for 30 minutes of context before getting to the point." And Margaret had left looking not offended, but rather like she was filing this away. Nathan, in the kitchen, had laughed. Quietly. He'd heard it from the other room. He hadn't expected, when he thought about it later, to find himself wanting to stay. Not because of the salary, not entirely. Because he was beginning to see her, the actual Vivian Sterling, behind the machinery of bristling competence and controlled distance. And what he saw was a woman who was not broken. She was damaged, yes. She was frightened. She was fighting, imperfectly and without much grace, against a reality she hadn't chosen. But she was not broken. He thought about what Lily had said. If you have a nice house, you have lots of chances. She had more than a nice house. She just didn't know it yet. Tick. The last evening of October, Nathan put Lily to bed in the guest house. The rabbit lamp threw its yellow circle on the ceiling. Lily was already half asleep, her stuffed animals arranged around her in the specific architecture she'd maintained since she was 3. "Dad," she murmured. "Yeah." "I like it here." He pulled the blanket up. "Yeah?" "It's quiet, but not lonely quiet." She turned her head on the pillow. "Vivian is getting less pointy." Nathan looked at his daughter. "When did you talk to her?" "In the garden yesterday. She came outside." Lily yawned. "She said she used to have a garden at her apartment before. She seemed sad about it." A pause. "I showed her my pill bug." "What did she say?" Lily considered. "She said it was interesting, and then she asked what it ate." She blinked slowly. "She actually wanted to know, not like a grown-up pretending." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed for a moment. "Get some sleep, Bug." He turned off the lamp and sat in the dark for another minute, listening to his daughter's breathing slow and even out. Getting less pointy. He carried that thought back to the main house, where the lights in the east wing were still on, where Vivian Sterling was still working at 11 o'clock at night. Because the thing about fear is that it doesn't clock out, and the thing about walls is that they take years to build and feel like they've been there forever. He left a cup of tea outside the study door. He didn't knock. He heard her chair move, heard the door open, heard a brief silence. No plate hit the wall. He counted that as a very good day. The tea became a ritual. Nathan hadn't planned it that way. The first cup had been impulsive. 11 at night, lights still on in the east wing, the specific kind of silence that comes from someone working too hard because stopping feels dangerous. He'd made the tea and left it outside the study door without thinking too much about it, and then gone back to the guest house and gone to sleep. The next evening, around 10:30, he'd found himself in the main house kitchen. Vivian had asked him to check the medication tray before bed, a routine Margaret had established. And he'd made a second cup almost without deciding to. Left it outside the door. No knock, no announcement. The third night, when he came to the kitchen, there was a note card on the counter. Small, cream-colored, written in a compressed and precise hand. Chamomile. Not the green tin. The other one. Second shelf. He'd stood there looking at it for a moment. It was not a thank you. It was an instruction. But it was also, unmistakably, an acknowledgement. She'd noticed, she'd thought about it enough to have a preference, and she'd left him a note rather than simply said nothing. He found the chamomile on the second shelf, made it the way she'd indicated, left it outside the door. The note card was gone the next morning. That was how November began. The days had found their shape by now, and shape is its own kind of peace, even when the shape contains difficulty. Nathan rose at 5:30 because that was when the household needed him. Medication schedules, breakfast preparation, the particular choreography of morning care that Vivian had outlined with the systematic precision of someone who had thought about it obsessively and still found it humiliating in ways she would never say out loud. She never said it was humiliating. She didn't have to. He'd watched enough people manage hard things to recognize the way dignity gets defended through control. The absolute insistence on specifics, on sequences, on things being done this way and not that way. It wasn't perfectionism. It was the last available territory. He respected that. He followed the sequences exactly. He didn't editorialize. What he hadn't expected, 7 weeks in, was that she would start talking. Not emotionally. Not in the confessional way of someone finally unburdening, more the way that people talk when they've been alone too long and the silence starts to feel less like preference and more like default. Small observations, clipped and factual, tossed out without looking at him, as if she were thinking out loud and he happened to be in the room. On a Wednesday morning, watching him cut fruit for her breakfast. My mother used to peel oranges in a single continuous ribbon. She could do the whole thing without breaking it. He didn't look up. Mine too. I never managed it. Neither did I. A pause. She'd have found that unreasonably funny. He put the plate in front of her. Past tense? She died when I was 24, said simply, without performance. Heart attack? She was 51. I'm sorry. She would have been very annoyed by all of this. Vivian's voice had that particular flatness that sometimes passed for dry humor and sometimes passed for pain, and was usually both at once. She had no patience for people feeling sorry for themselves, including me. Was she hard on you? She was honest with me. It felt the same when I was young. Vivian picked up her fork. It feels different now. Nathan sat down across from her with his own coffee. She'd never invited him to sit at her table, but she'd stopped indicating that he shouldn't, which he took as meaningful. What would she say? About the accident. About all of it. Vivian was quiet for a moment. She ate a piece of melon with the focused efficiency she brought to meals. Food as fuel, not occasion. She'd say that I was letting the accident be the biggest thing that ever happened to me, and that was a choice, not a fact. She set down the fork. She'd be right. She usually was. That sounds hard to hear. Most true things are. He drank his coffee. She ate her breakfast. Outside, the November morning pressed against the window. Gray sky, bare branches, the first real cold of the season settling into the Connecticut countryside. Your daughter hasn't been in the garden lately, Vivian said, not looking up. Too cold in the mornings. She goes after school sometimes. I know, I can see the garden from the east wing window. Another pause. She talks to the plants. She does. What does she say? Nathan considered. I've only caught pieces of it. Mostly she gives them updates. How the weather is. What she had for lunch. Something shifted in Vivian's expression. Quick, involuntary, gone before it could be named. That's... She stopped. What? Nothing. She picked up her fork again. It's very earnest. She is very earnest. It's not a criticism. I know, he said. I didn't take it as one. Attack. The physical therapy sessions were 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, with Dr. Reena Patel, who arrived with the brisk professionalism of someone who had worked with 100 difficult patients and had developed a hide like comfortable leather, thick without being insensitive. Nathan assisted with setup and equipment and stayed available in the main house during sessions in case he was needed for transfers. He didn't observe the sessions themselves. Vivian had made clear on day one that the therapy room was private, but he heard enough from the adjacent hallway to understand the shape of them. They were hard. The nerve pain was the thing nobody who hadn't experienced it could fully understand, and Nathan didn't pretend to. He'd read about it. He'd done a significant amount of reading in the first 2 weeks because he believed in understanding what he was dealing with, and the reading had given him information without giving him comprehension. Phantom sensation. Neuropathic pain. The body insisting on a reality the injury had revised. He understood the mechanism. He did not understand what it felt like to live in a body that was simultaneously numb and on fire. What he understood was that on Thursday afternoons after the sessions, Vivian was quieter and shorter and held herself differently. A tighter economy of movement, everything carefully conserved, as if she were managing a budget that was running low. He adjusted Thursday afternoons accordingly. Dinner earlier, tea on the desk before she asked. Fewer words than usual, which was already not many. She noticed. She didn't mention it. He didn't require her to. It was on the third Thursday of November, after a session that had been, he could tell from the hallway, from Dr. Patel's voice, from the particular silence that followed certain exchanges, more difficult than usual, that he knocked on the therapy room door afterward and asked if she needed anything. "I'm fine," she said. He opened the door anyway, just slightly. She was in her chair, positioned near the window, looking out at the gray November light. Her hands were in her lap. Her jaw was set. She turned to look at him, and the look was sharp and aimed. "I said I was fine." "I know." He leaned against the doorframe, not coming in, not retreating. "I'm going to make lunch. You want soup or a sandwich?" A beat of silence. "Soup." "Tomato or the other one?" "The white bean, with the bread from the second shelf." "Okay." He started to pull the door closed. "Nathan." He stopped. It was the first time she'd used his first name. He wasn't sure she'd noticed she'd done it. "The session was difficult today," she said. "That's all. I'll be fine." "I know you will," he said, not as a comfort, as a statement. He went to make the soup. There was a call one Friday morning that he wasn't meant to overhear. He was in the hallway outside the study, replacing a burnt-out light fixture in the wall sconce, a small maintenance task Margaret had left on the list, when he heard Vivian's voice through the partially open door. She was on the phone, and in the way that people sometimes are on calls when they believe they're alone, her voice had dropped the usual careful architecture. He didn't move. He should have moved. He stayed still and replaced the bulb and heard enough. "I've seen the revised proposal, Richard. I wrote the original company philosophy. I recognize when my own language has been stripped out of something." A pause. "I'm not saying the advisory role isn't. I understand the structure. What I'm saying is that the culture section reads like it was written by someone who never actually met our early team." Another pause, longer. "I know what the board decided. I was there. I was in the room by video conference, which I think we can both agree is not the same as being in the room." Her voice had a contained quality, like water behind glass, held but pressurized. "I built that company with 12 people in a leased space that we couldn't afford to heat properly in January. I know every decision we made and why we made it, and the fact that I'm giving input from a phone call instead of a conference table doesn't change what I know or what I built." The pause that followed was the long kind, the kind where the other person is talking and saying something that lands hard. "Thank you, Richard. I'll look at the revised document." The call ended. Nathan finished replacing the bulb. He stepped quietly back from the door and down the hall toward the kitchen, moving without particular hurry, giving her the privacy of believing she hadn't been heard. He understood now more of what he was dealing with. It wasn't just the accident. It wasn't just Marcus leaving or the board restructuring her role. It was the cumulative compression of all of it at once. Her mobility, her company, her relationship, her position, all gone or diminished within the span of months, while she was still trying to figure out how to shower without help. The bitterness he'd seen in those first weeks was not simply a personality trait. It was the scar tissue of a series of losses that had arrived without adequate spacing. He thought about his own situation, Meridian, the pink slip, the months of applications, and understood that his losses and hers were not the same size, but they rhymed. The way it felt when something you'd built and relied on was taken from you before you were ready. The way you kept doing the math, kept running the numbers, kept trying to find the version of the equation that came out differently. He understood her better than he'd expected. The question was what to do with that. He told her about the job loss on a Thursday evening, not as a confession, not as a strategic move to create intimacy. He told her because she'd asked him a direct question and he decided to give her a direct answer. They'd been in the kitchen. He was cleaning up after dinner. She'd come in for water. She came to the kitchen sometimes in the evenings now, in the way of someone who has noticed that a space is comfortable without admitting they're seeking it out. She'd been watching him work and had said, unprompted and in her usual flat delivery, "You're overqualified for this." Nathan had rinsed the pan. "How do you mean?" "You manage a household, you manage schedules and medications, and physical care and logistics. You negotiate between what I need and what's possible without making either party feel like they've lost something. That's not caregiver work, that's operations." He put the pan on the drying rack. "I worked in logistics for 9 years. Operations was part of it." "Were you good at it?" "Yeah, I was." "Then why are you here?" He dried his hands on the dish towel. There was a version of this answer that was simple and economic and technically true. "Because the pay is excellent and I needed it." He started to say it. What came out instead was, "I got let go in August, restructuring. They eliminated the whole position tier. I applied to 47 jobs and got nowhere. I had 18 weeks of severance, my mother's medication costs $400 a month after insurance, and my daughter needed shoes." He folded the dish towel. "Your listing offered $9,500 a month plus benefits that cover dependents. I did the math." Vivian looked at him. She had the particular stillness of someone recalibrating. The position was posted as a caregiving role. "I can provide care." He hung the towel on the rack. "I can also do operations. I can do both." "You've been doing both." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "You weren't upfront about this in the interview." "Margaret asked me if I could handle the position. I said yes. Everything else was implied." "That's a convenient interpretation." "It's an accurate one." He met her eyes. "I didn't deceive you about anything that affects the work. I came here because I needed the salary and the benefits and because I knew I could do the job. Both things are true." She looked at him for a long moment. He waited. This was one of the things he'd learned about Vivian. She needed the space after a statement to think it through, and interrupting that space with reassurance or elaboration was the wrong move. "Your mother," she said finally. "The medication, is it being covered now?" "Yes. Your benefits package covers dependents." "What does she have?" "Rheumatoid arthritis, progressive. The medication manages it, but the cost without adequate coverage is—" He stopped. "It's a lot." Vivian said nothing. She looked at the counter for a moment, then turned her chair toward the kitchen doorway. She stopped. "The day you arrived," she said, not turning back to face him, "you said you'd tell me your perspective when you had something worth saying." "I remember." "Is that it?" He thought about it. "Part of it." She left without saying anything else. What? December arrived, and with it a cold that settled into the estate like a permanent house guest. The kind of deep, dry winter cold that made the old stone walls of the house contract at night and made the fireplaces feel like necessities rather than aesthetics. Nathan had started a fire in the study hearth in the evenings, which Vivian had not asked for and had not told him to stop. She'd started working closer to the fireplace. He took that as sufficient feedback. Lily had found the estate's library. It was a room Nathan had shown her in the first week, instructing her firmly that it was to be treated with the same reverence as a public library. Books returned to where they came from, nothing eaten, quiet. Lily had taken this very seriously and developed a habit of spending her after-school hour in there, working through picture books and early chapter books, with the methodical focus of a child who genuinely loved reading and had recently discovered that someone else's library was even better than the school's. Nathan had mentioned this to Vivian once, obliquely, expecting it to be an issue. "Has anything been damaged?" Vivian asked. "No, she's very careful." "Then I don't see the problem." The problem, as it turned out, was not the books. It was what happened on a Tuesday afternoon when Lily came to find Nathan in the main house kitchen with a chapter book tucked under her arm and the specific expression she got when she'd encountered something puzzling and needed to process it out loud. Vivian was in the library, Lily said. Nathan looked up from the medication chart he was reviewing. Was she? She was reading. I didn't know she was there until I was already inside. Lily set the book on the counter. She didn't tell me to leave. Did she say anything? She asked what I was reading. Lily paused. I showed her. She said she'd read it when she was my age. Another pause, more complicated. She seemed like she remembered something nice. But then she looked, I don't know, not sad exactly. What then? Lily thought about it with the focused deliberation she gave to things that mattered, like when you remember something nice that you can't go back to. Nathan set down the chart. His daughter was 7 years old and had just precisely described a specific shade of grief. She's okay, Bug, he said. I know. Lily picked up her book. I just wanted you to know so you could, in case she needed tea or something. He looked at his daughter for a long moment. Good thinking, he said. He made the tea. But the money problem, which had been in the background since the beginning, resurfaced in the third week of December with the particular timing that money problems have. The worst possible moment, which is to say, every moment. His landlord, Gerald Pitts, had sent a notice to Carol at the Callaway Street address. The duplex would be going up for sale in February. Existing tenants had the right of first offer, but if they didn't exercise it within 30 days, the unit would be listed. The purchase price was $240,000. Carol texted him a photo of the notice without comment. The subtext was clear. Nathan sat with this for 2 days before he told her he'd figure it out. This was, he knew, not entirely honest. 240 was not a number he could move toward in any realistic time frame. Not yet. The sterling salary was restoring his savings at a rate he hadn't experienced before, but the starting line had been so far back that meaningful accumulation was still months away. He didn't sleep well for several nights. He ran the math, as he always did, and the math told him what math often tells you, that the thing you need is the thing you don't quite have access to yet. On a Wednesday evening, he was in the estate kitchen later than usual. Carol had called with a question about the insurance claim that had taken 45 minutes to untangle, and Vivian came in for water and found him sitting at the table with his phone and a yellow legal pad covered in numbers. She looked at the legal pad. He didn't hide it. Landlord selling, he said. My mother's been at that address for 6 years. Vivian got her water. She didn't sit down. What's the number? 240. She said nothing for a moment. She was looking at the yellow pad with an expression he couldn't read. Do you want a recommendation for a mortgage broker? I know several. My credit is fine. The issue is the down payment timeline. How far are you? He looked at the number on the page. He'd been rounding, as you do when the real number is something you're not quite ready to say aloud. Far enough that a mortgage broker isn't the immediate solution. She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them said anything for a moment. And in that silence was the particular discomfort of two people who have learned to be honest with each other bumping up against the specific place where honesty costs something. I'm not asking you for anything, Nathan said quietly. I want to be very clear about that. I know you're not. Her voice was measured. That's not... She stopped. I'm aware of what you've been managing since you got here. I'm not unobservant. She turned her chair slightly away, which was the move she made when she was thinking about something she hadn't decided how to handle yet. I'll let you know if I think of anything useful. You don't need to. I know I don't need to. She looked at him sharply. Stop assuming that everything I do is out of obligation. He was quiet for a moment. Fair enough. She left. He sat with the yellow pad for another hour, adding and subtracting, and eventually put it away because the numbers were not going to change tonight, and there was no point in asking them to. He went back to the guest house. Through Lily's door, he could hear the soft sound of her breathing. Even, steady, the uncomplicated sleep of a child who knew where she was going to wake up. He stood in the hallway outside her door for a minute, listening. That helped, the way it always did. Not because it solved anything, because it reminded him what the math was for. Christmas came to the estate the way things came to Vivian's world generally. On her terms, or not at all. She didn't decorate. She'd been explicit about this when Margaret raised the subject. It's a house, not a department store, she'd said, and that had been the end of that conversation. Nathan didn't argue the point. He bought a small tree for the guest house, a 3-foot thing from a lot in town, tied to the roof of his truck with a precision that impressed Lily, and set it up on the table by the window. Lily decorated it with complete autonomy, which resulted in a tree that had 60% of its ornaments on the bottom third and a star that was slightly crooked because she'd insisted on placing it herself. He thought it was perfect. On Christmas Eve, he put Lily to bed early. She had the practical theory that sleeping fast made morning arrive sooner, and sat for a while in the guest house living room with the small tree's lights on and the rest of the room dark, and let himself be tired in the way you can only be when you're finally still enough to feel it. He thought about the year, the pink slip in August, the months of applications, the temp work, the cold math of Callaway Street, the drive up the private road to the estate, and the first sight of this impossible house. Vivian's gray eyes behind her reading glasses, assessing him across a desk with the focused intensity of someone deciding whether to trust their weight to uncertain ground. He thought about what had shifted in those weeks. Not dramatically. Nothing in real life shifts dramatically, despite what movies suggest. It was the accumulation of small things. The note card about chamomile. The first time she'd said his name. Lily's report of the library. Of the expression that looked like remembering something you couldn't go back to. He thought about the woman on the phone with Richard, voice pressurized behind glass, defending something she'd built with her hands and her mind and her impossible hours, to people who had decided she was an advisory voice now rather than a foundational one. She was not broken. He'd thought that in the first weeks, and he still believed it, but she was carrying something, several somethings, that she'd been carrying alone for a very long time. He knew what that felt like. He got up, turned off the tree lights, and went to bed. In the morning, Lily woke him at 6:15 with the information that it had snowed, and could they go outside immediately? They went outside immediately. Later that morning, he brought Vivian's breakfast to the study and found her looking out the window at the snow-covered grounds. She didn't turn when he came in. He set the tray on the desk. "Lily made a snow figure," he said. "She says it's a horse, but it's more of a structural suggestion." Vivian didn't say anything for a moment. She was watching something in the garden, Lily, probably, who had gone back out after breakfast. "Is she warm enough?" 3 layers and a hat she hates. "She's fine." He turned to leave. "Nathan." Her voice was quiet. Something in it was different. Not softer exactly, but less defended, less held. "Merry Christmas." He stopped. He looked back at her. She was still facing the window. "Merry Christmas," he said. She nodded, just slightly, still not turning. He left her with her breakfast and her window and the snow-covered garden where his daughter was rearranging the structural suggestion of a horse with complete and total confidence. He thought, walking back down the corridor, "She's getting less pointy." He thought Lily had been right all along. January came in hard. Not dramatically. Not the cinematic kind of winter that arrives with a single brutal storm and then settles into something picturesque. It came in the way real cold comes to New England. Gradually, then all at once, the temperature dropping by increments until one morning, Nathan walked from the guest house to the main house, and the air had a quality to it that felt less like weather and more like a warning. The estate responded to cold the way old stone buildings do, imperfectly. The heating system was good but not perfect, and there were corners of the house that the warmth didn't fully reach. Vivian's east wing was well insulated. The therapy room was not. Dr. Patel arrived on a Thursday morning in early January and spent the first 10 minutes of the session with her coat still on. Vivian had noticed the cold affecting her more than usual, or rather, Nathan had noticed it affecting her without her saying so, which was the way most things manifested with Vivian. Not complaint, not disclosure, but a slight recalibration of her tolerance, a session that ran shorter, an evening where she stopped working at 9 instead of 11. Small signals, if you were paying attention. He was paying attention. He'd put a space heater in the therapy room on a Wednesday evening, setting it to run for an hour before the Thursday session. He didn't mention this to Vivian. Dr. Patel arrived, took her coat off within 2 minutes, and said nothing, which Nathan took as the appropriate level of acknowledgement. What he hadn't anticipated, what nobody anticipated, because that's the nature of the thing, was the night of January 14th. Boys. He'd learned to sleep lightly at the estate. Not from anxiety exactly, more from the same instinct that kept him half aware during Lily's early childhood, the sense that being fully unconscious was a luxury that the position didn't entirely allow. He heard the estate settle and shift at night. He knew the sounds of it. What woke him at 2:17 a.m. was not a sound he recognized. It was the estate's internal call system, a discreet setup Margaret had installed in the first month, a small device on his nightstand that received a signal from a button in Vivian's bedroom. She'd never used it. In nearly 4 months, through difficult sessions and hard afternoons, and the occasional evening when he could hear from the hallway that she was in pain, she had never once pressed the button. It was pressing now. Nathan was out of bed before he was fully awake, pulling on jeans and a sweatshirt, moving down the covered path to the main house with the particular focused calm that he'd developed over years of middle-of-the-night parenting emergencies. The ability to be alert without being panicked, to move quickly without moving recklessly. He knocked twice on Vivian's bedroom door, his code, 2 knocks close together, and opened it. The room was lit by the bedside lamp. Vivian was sitting up in bed, her back against the headboard, both hands pressed flat against the mattress on either side of her. Her jaw was set so hard he could see the muscle working at her temple. Her face was gray-white, the color of paper left in the sun. "The medication," she said. Her voice was even, controlled, clearly costing her something. "Top drawer of the nightstand. The orange bottle. 2 tablets." He was already moving. He found the bottle, read the label, a nerve pain medication, prescribed by her neurologist, shook 2 tablets into his palm, and handed them to her with the glass of water from the nightstand. She took them. She didn't look at him. She was doing the thing she did when she was managing pain, fixed point on the wall, jaw set, breathing through her nose in a rhythm that was deliberate and concentrated. He pulled the chair from her desk to beside the bed and sat down. She didn't tell him to leave. That was its own kind of answer. "How long has it been like this?" he asked. "A while." The words were compressed. "It started around midnight. I thought it would pass." "Has it been this bad before?" A pause. "Not in a few months." Another pause, shorter. "It comes in waves. The medication takes 20 minutes." "Okay." He didn't say anything else. He sat in the chair and he waited. The next 40 minutes were the hardest Nathan had spent at the estate, and not because of anything he was required to do. He was not required to do much. Get water when the glass emptied, adjust the pillow she'd pressed against the small of her back, keep his presence steady in the room without making it about his presence. The difficulty was in witnessing. Vivian Sterling was a woman who had maintained enormous control over her own presentation in the 4 months he'd known her. The control was not vanity, it was survival. It was the mechanism by which she'd managed to keep functioning after everything that had been taken from her. And now he was sitting 3 feet away watching the control stripped off, watching her fight through something that was beyond her ability to manage through willpower alone. At the 20-minute mark, the medication began to work, or started to. Not fully. The wave shortened. Her breathing changed, still deliberate, but less desperate. Her hands relaxed from the flat-pressed position on the mattress. At 30 minutes, she leaned her head back against the headboard and closed her eyes. "It's easing," she said. "Good." Her eyes stayed closed. He didn't move. At some point, 40 minutes, maybe, she said without opening her eyes. "You can go." "I know." He didn't move. She opened her eyes and looked at him. The gray-white was fading from her face, replaced by something that was simply exhausted, profoundly, flatly exhausted. "You've been here 40 minutes. 43. Something crossed her face. "That's—" She stopped. She looked at the ceiling. "You didn't have to stay." "I know." "So, why did you?" He was quiet for a moment, not finding the answer. He had the answer, but deciding how much of it to say. "When Lily was 3, she had a fever that spiked to 104. I sat on the floor next to her bed for 6 hours because I was afraid to be further away than that, even though there was nothing I could do about the fever except wait." He rested his elbows on his knees. "You learn to sit with someone through something you can't fix. You learn that the sitting matters even when you can't fix it." Vivian looked at him for a long time. "Everyone left," she said. It was quiet, stated plainly, without the armor she usually put around anything approaching vulnerability. "After the accident, everyone found a reasonable, understandable reason to leave." Marcus, the board, the friends who called for the first 3 months and then stopped calling. Her voice didn't waver, which was somehow harder to hear than if it had. I spent 14 months learning that I was the kind of person people leave when things get difficult. I had evidence, a lot of evidence. That's their story, Nathan said. Not yours. It happened to me. Yeah, it did. He met her eyes. And here you are anyway. She looked at him. He looked back. Outside the window, the January night was absolutely still. No wind, no sound, the deep winter quiet of a property that was far from anything. Why are you still here? She asked. Honestly, not the answer you gave me in the first week. The real one. He thought about that. He thought about the pink slip and the math and the 47 applications. He thought about the note card about chamomile. He thought about Lily saying she's getting less pointy with the confidence of someone who understood things without needing them explained. Because I see you, he said. Not the CEO, not the accident, you. And what I see is someone worth sticking around for. He paused. That's the honest answer. Vivian was very still. Then, quietly, I used your mother's medication. He blinked. What? When you told me about the cost, about the coverage situation. She kept her eyes on the ceiling, and he understood she found it easier not to look at him for this part. I know people at the pharmaceutical company that makes her medication. I made a call. The cost should have dropped significantly when the New Year's benefits renewed. A pause. I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to be. I wasn't doing it so you'd feel obligated to me. Nathan sat back in the chair. He thought about Carol's text in late December. The copay is almost nothing now. Did something change? He'd assumed it was the benefits package renewing. He'd been wrong. Vivian, I'm not looking for thanks. I'm not thanking you. He stopped. He tried again. That was my mother. She looked at him then, finally. I know. The room was quiet for a long moment. She sounds like someone worth fighting for, Vivian said. The same way Lily is. The same way you... She stopped. Her jaw tightened briefly, and he recognized it. Not pain this time, but the closing of something that had opened further than she'd intended. The same way I what? He asked. She looked at the far wall. The same way some people are worth keeping. He let that sit where she'd put it. He didn't pick it up and examine it in front of her. He understood by now that Vivian communicated in the negative space. What she didn't elaborate on, what she let stand without completion, was often the truest thing. Do you need anything else tonight? He asked. No. A beat. No. He stood. He put the chair back at the desk, exactly where it had been. He straightened the water glass on the nightstand. Nathan. Her voice stopped him at the door. Yeah. She was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen before. Not the gray-eyed assessment of the first weeks, not the controlled flat calm of a difficult day. Something more unguarded than either. Something that had been underneath all of it the whole time, waiting to be allowed to surface. Thank you, she said. Not as a social reflex. He recognized his own words. Good night, Vivian, he said. He closed the door quietly behind him and walked back through the cold night to the guest house, and he stood in the kitchen for a while with the lights off. Not quite ready to go back to sleep, just standing with what had happened. The next morning arrived with the ordinary insistence that mornings have, regardless of what has shifted in the night, 6 a.m. comes on schedule. Nathan was in the kitchen when Vivian came from the east wing at 7:15, which was later than her usual time. She came in quietly and stopped in the doorway, looking at the table where her breakfast was already set. Eggs the right temperature, fruit, the chamomile tea. She sat down. He brought his coffee and sat across from her. Neither of them acknowledged the night directly. This was, he'd come to understand, simply how she processed things. Not with conversation, not with the narrated processing of emotions, but by continuing. By the next day's breakfast being a normal breakfast. By the ordinary architecture of routine absorbing what had happened and carrying it forward. But there was something different in the room. A pressure that had been present for months, the slight atmospheric tension of two people maintaining careful distance, had shifted. Not gone, but different, less effortful. After a while, she said, Dr. Patel is recommending an additional session per week. Okay. It would be Mondays, early, 6:30. I'll be ready. She ate a piece of melon. She thinks the January cold is affecting the nerve responses. She wants to increase the frequency while the weather holds. Makes sense. Vivian looked at him. You're not asking why I'm telling you all this. Should I be? Most people would ask why I'm giving them the medical reasoning instead of just the schedule. Nathan drank his coffee. Because you like being understood, not just accommodated. If I know why the session is being added, I understand what it's for, and I can adjust accordingly. If you just give me the schedule, I'm following instructions. He set down the cup. You're not interested in people who just follow instructions. She was quiet for a moment. No, she said. I'm not. I know. She went back to her eggs. No. The shift between them, once it had happened, was not seamless. That's not how it works. There were still mornings when she was sharp in a way that had edges, still afternoons when the pain made her short and the shortness was aimed without precision. There were still moments when Nathan said something in the wrong register, too casual or not casual enough. And the temperature in the room dropped 3 degrees. But the fundamental dynamic had changed. The testing had stopped. She wasn't waiting for him to leave anymore. Or rather, she still expected it. 14 months of evidence was not overwritten by one night. But she'd stopped engineering it. The plate-throwing phase was so far behind them now, it felt like a different story. What replaced it was stranger and harder to name. A kind of working partnership that was more than the sum of its parts. She started including him in conversations about the estate, small decisions, practical things, but things that had previously been resolved entirely through Margaret. She asked his opinion on a contractor proposal for the therapy room insulation and actually listened to his answer, which included a counter-proposal that saved 11% of the quote. She mentioned it to Margaret afterward as Nathan's read on it, which Margaret reported to Nathan with the specific expression of someone who had worked for Vivian Sterling for years and found this development worth noting. He, in turn, stopped treating the position as strictly functional. He stopped thinking about it as a job he was performing and started thinking about it as a situation he was in, which sounds like a small distinction but is, in practice, the difference between managing something and actually being present for it. He was present for it. It was Lily who broke the ice on something Nathan had been carefully not addressing. She did it, as she did most things, without any strategy, simply by being honest in the direct, unfiltered way of a 7-year-old who had not yet learned that some truths are better approached sideways. It was a Saturday afternoon in late January. Lily had been in the main house library and on her way back had stopped in the East Wing hallway because she could hear, through the partially open therapy room door, something she found confusing. Vivian was in a session. Dr. Patel was working on range of motion exercises, passive movement of Vivian's legs, the kind of careful, systematic work that looked gentle from the outside and was not. Through the door, Lily had heard Vivian make a sound that wasn't quite pain and wasn't quite effort, but was somewhere between the two, and then Dr. Patel saying, "Hold that. Stay with it," in the calm voice of someone who said that several times a week. Nathan found Lily in the kitchen afterward, sitting on the counter with her book closed on her lap, thinking. "She can't feel her legs," Lily said. It wasn't a question. He leaned against the counter opposite her. "That's right. But they still hurt sometimes? It's complicated. The nerves still send signals. They get confused. Pain without the connection that should go with it." Lily absorbed this. "That sounds really awful." "Yeah, it does." "Does she know it might get better?" "The doctors say some things might improve. It takes time and a lot of work." Lily looked at her book. "Is that what she's working so hard for? In the therapy?" "Partly. And because she's the kind of person who doesn't stop working at something just because it's hard." "Like you," Lily said. Nathan looked at his daughter. "You're the same that way," Lily said, with the matter-of-fact certainty of someone stating something too obvious to require emphasis. "You both just keep going even when things are hard." She hopped off the counter. "I'm going to ask Margaret if I can bring her tea after her sessions. The Saturday ones. She always looks tired." "You should ask Vivian, not Margaret." "Oh." Lily considered this. "Okay." She headed for the therapy room hallway, then stopped and looked back. "Dad?" "Yeah." "I think she likes us being here." He didn't say anything. "Not just you," Lily clarified. "Both of us." She turned back down the hallway with the confidence of someone who had decided the matter was settled. He stood in the kitchen for a moment after she left. He thought, she's usually not wrong. Lily asked Vivian about the tea. Vivian said yes, which Lily took as enthusiastic agreement and Nathan took as a significant data point. The Saturday tea became a ritual. Lily would appear at the therapy room door about 20 minutes after the session ended, long enough for Vivian to have transferred back to her chair and for the immediate fatigue to settle into something manageable, with 2 cups, one for Vivian and one for herself. She'd sit in the corner of the therapy room on the low bench Dr. Patel used for equipment, and she'd talk about her week while Vivian drank her tea. Vivian listened. Not politely. Actually listened. The kind of listening you could tell from the questions, which were specific and showed she'd retained the previous week's details. You said the girl Emma was being difficult, she said one Saturday in early February. Lily made a complicated face. She said my book report was wrong because I said the character was brave and she said the character was just scared of being seen as a coward. But I looked it up and Mrs. Howard said both things can be true at the same time. What did Emma say to that? She said that was a cop-out answer. Vivian raised an eyebrow. Second graders are using the phrase cop-out? Emma's older sister is in 5th grade. Ah. Vivian drank her tea. For what it's worth, your teacher was right. They're not mutually exclusive. The most interesting kind of bravery usually comes from people who are terrified. Lily looked at her. Is that what you do? A pause. Sometimes. When you do the therapy even though it hurts? Vivian looked at Lily for a moment with that expression Nathan had started to recognize, the one that came when his daughter said something that landed somewhere Vivian hadn't prepared herself for. That's one example, she said. That's brave, Lily said with the flat certainty of a verdict. Even if you're also scared. Both things. She drank her tea. Vivian drank hers. The therapy room was quiet and warm from the space heater, and the winter light came through the window at a low angle that made everything look softer than it was. Nathan heard about this from Lily at dinner. He didn't let his expression do too much with it. She said the most interesting kind of bravery comes from people who are terrified, Lily reported, eating her pasta. That's true, Nathan said. She's smart. She is. She's also lonely, Lily said, in the same neutral tone she'd have used to note the weather. But less than before. He put down his fork and looked at his daughter. Where are you getting all of this? Lily shrugged. I just watch people. She twirled pasta. You do too. That's why you're good at taking care of her. She paused. She watches you too, you know, when you're not looking. Lily, I'm just saying what I see. She ate her pasta. Mrs. Ferraro says that's all anyone can really do. Mrs. Ferraro says a lot of things. Mrs. Ferraro is very wise, Lily confirmed solemnly and asked for more pasta. What? February brought a thaw mid-month. Not a real thaw, just 3 days where the temperature climbed above 40 and the snow on the grounds turned soft and gray. Vivian had taken to spending part of her late mornings near the east wing window, where the winter sun came in strongest, working at a laptop she'd moved to a table she could position in the light. On a Wednesday, Nathan was replacing the bulb in the east wing wall sconce again. It was always the same sconce, something wrong with the wiring that the electrician had never fully fixed, when Vivian looked up from her laptop and said, Sterling Dynamics is acquiring a smaller firm. The announcement goes public Thursday. He looked at her. Okay. I'm on the board call this afternoon. I drafted the integration framework. She said it in an even voice, looking back at the screen. Richard was surprised. He said it was the most thorough framework the advisory committee had submitted this year. Nathan finished with the sconce. And what did you say? I said that I drafted 15 of these frameworks over the course of building the company, and that I appreciated his surprise while finding it slightly insulting. She paused. I said that last part more diplomatically. How diplomatically? I said I was glad to be able to contribute at this level. Her voice was completely straight, but there was something in it, which means the same thing but with fewer legal implications. He laughed, not a polite laugh, an actual one, which seemed to catch them both slightly off guard. Vivian looked at him with an expression that took him a moment to identify because he hadn't seen it before on her face, or not quite like this. She was pleased. Not in a performance way, not for effect, just genuinely, quietly pleased. There it is, he said. What? That's what you looked like before. Who you were before the accident, when things were working the way you built them to work. He held her gaze. That's what it looks like when you're doing what you're actually good at. She was quiet for a moment. Something moved through her expression, complicated and quick. It's been a while since I felt like that, she said. I know. How do you know? You didn't know me before. I know what it looks like when something fits, he said simply. Same as I know what it looks like when something doesn't. She looked at him for another moment and then back at her screen. The framework took me 6 hours, she said. I don't think it should have taken 6 hours. Was it good? It was excellent. Then 6 hours was the right amount of time. She didn't respond to that, but the pleased expression didn't fully leave either. He collected his toolbox and headed for the door. Nathan? Her voice was quieter this time. Yeah. The acquisition announcement, when it goes public Thursday, there's going to be coverage. Financial press. Sterling Dynamics will be mentioned as strengthening its position. A pause. I drafted the framework that made this possible. No one outside the board will know that. She said it plainly, without self-pity, just noting it. He turned back. You'll know it. She looked at him. That's not nothing, he said. She was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the February sun was doing its best against the remnants of snow on the grounds. No, she said finally. It's not nothing. He left her to her work, and for the first time in months she did not hear the sound of someone leaving and brace for the next absence. She heard the sound of someone stepping away who intended to come back. She sat with that for a while. It felt, against all her accumulated evidence, like something she might be able to rely on. She was not sure yet what to do with that. But for the first time in a very long time, she thought she might want to find out. The integration framework made the rounds. Nathan didn't follow financial news closely. He never had. It wasn't his world. But Margaret mentioned it on a Thursday morning with the particular careful neutrality of someone who knew the information mattered without knowing exactly how to deliver it. The acquisition announcement had gone public. The coverage had been favorable, and somewhere in the secondary reporting a financial analyst had noted that the strategic framework behind the deal showed a level of operational sophistication that suggested Sterling Dynamics still had serious intellectual horsepower in its leadership structure. Nobody named Vivian. The analyst credited the executive committee. Nathan read the piece on his phone over his morning coffee, then put the phone down and went to make her breakfast. She was already in the study when he brought it in, earlier than usual, 6:45, the laptop open, and a yellow legal pad covered in notes to her left. She was in the focused state he recognized as genuine work, not performance, the kind of absorbed concentration that meant she'd been at it since before he arrived. He set the plate down without interrupting her. He poured the chamomile. I saw the piece, he said. She didn't look up. Which one? The one that credited the executive committee. A pause. Her pen moved on the legal pad. There were several? That bothered you. It would bother anyone. She looked up then. Her expression was composed and even, the way it got when she was deciding how honest to be. It would bother anyone who did the work and watched someone else accept the acknowledgement. That's not specific to me. No, he agreed, but it happened to you. She looked at him for a moment, then she looked back at the legal pad. I've been thinking about something different, something that isn't about Sterling Dynamics at all. He sat down. He waited. There are 3.7 million people in the United States with spinal cord injuries or similar mobility impairments, she said. She said it the way she said things when she'd been thinking about them long enough that the numbers had become personal. 60% of them are unemployed, not because they can't work, because the infrastructure doesn't exist. Accessible workplaces, adaptive technology support, employment pipeline organizations that actually function. She tapped the legal pad. The medical costs average $52,000 a year for incomplete injuries. More for complete. Most people can't absorb that without family support or significant personal resources. Most people don't have either. Nathan looked at the legal pad. It was dense. Not emotional, not exploratory, but the real kind of thinking. Structured, evidenced, argued. How long have you been working on this? He asked. Since January. A beat. Since the night. Since the beginning of the year. He understood what she meant. Since the night in January when he'd sat in the chair for 43 minutes. This is a foundation, he said. It wasn't a question. It could be. It needs funding structure, governance, a clear programmatic focus. She looked at the legal pad. The medical support component is obvious. Medication subsidy, adaptive equipment grants. But the employment piece is what matters most. It's not enough to help people survive their injuries. They need somewhere to go afterward, something to build. Nathan was quiet for a moment. He was looking at the legal pad with the focused attention he gave to things he was thinking seriously about. You'd need a community integration arm, not just grants and adaptive tech, actual placement work. Companies that have committed to accessibility hiring, not just compliance. Consulting on physical infrastructure, something that connects all the pieces. Vivian looked at him. That's exactly the gap. The medical side and the employment side operate completely separately, and the person who needs both is left to navigate between two systems that don't communicate. She paused. How do you know that? I had a buddy in logistics, Darnell. Workplace accident, lost most of the function in his left hand. He spent 14 months trying to get back into the workforce, and the systems they didn't talk to each other. Medical team had no idea what employers needed. Vocational rehab had no idea what his actual capabilities were. He had to become his own case manager. Nathan leaned forward. He figured it out eventually, but not everyone has Darnell's persistence. Vivian was watching him with the particular focus she gave to information that mattered. What does he do now? Inventory management, different company. He's good at it. Nathan paused. He could have been doing it 12 months earlier if the system hadn't made him fight his way through it alone. She looked at her legal pad, then back at him. I need someone to build the operational model, the funding structure, and the programmatic design. I can do that. I've built companies from concept before. But the ground-level operations, the actual delivery infrastructure, that's a different skill set. It's logistics work, essentially, understanding systems from the inside. He held her gaze. Are you offering me a different job? I'm asking if you'd want one. She said it carefully, precisely. Not instead of this. In addition to it, eventually. When the foundation is real enough to need it. She looked down at the legal pad. You've been doing operations work since you walked through the door. Unofficially. I'd rather it be official. Nathan sat back in the chair. He thought about Meridian, the 9 years, the pink slip, the particular humiliation of being told your position was being eliminated as if you and the position were the same thing. He thought about the 47 applications. He thought about the temp work and the math and the specific vertigo of free fall. He thought about Vivian saying, I see what it looks like when something fits. I'd want it, he said. Something shifted in her expression, a release of something she'd been holding. It was brief, and she recovered it quickly, but he'd seen it. Good, she said. She looked back at the laptop. I'll need a draft organizational structure by end of March. Your section, operations and community integration. I'll work on funding and governance. End of March. He stood. I'll need access to the research you've been building. I'll send it tonight. He picked up the breakfast tray to take it back to the kitchen. He was at the door when she said, Nathan. He stopped. When I said I see what it looks like when something fits, she was looking at the legal pad. I was thinking about this. The foundation. A pause. That's what I was thinking about. He understood by now the specific way Vivian Sterling said one thing when she meant something larger. The partial disclosure. The statement that was technically accurate and also, around its edges, about considerably more. I know, he said. He took the tray back to the kitchen. He stood at the sink for a moment and looked out the window at the February grounds, gray and brown and patchy snow. The particular ugliness of a landscape between seasons, not quite what it was and not yet what it would be. He thought that was about right. March arrived, and this foundation became real in the way that things become real when someone with Vivian Sterling's capability and contacts decides to make them real, not gradually, but in a series of rapid forward movements that had the quality of watching someone who had been stationary for too long finally in motion. She filed the organizational documents on a Tuesday. She had calls with 3 potential board members by Thursday. By the end of the second week, she'd identified a matching grant from a private medical research fund that would cover the first year of operational costs if the foundation could demonstrate a viable program model within 6 months. Nathan worked on the operations section at the guest house kitchen table in the evenings after Lily was asleep, with the legal pad he'd adopted from Vivian's methodology and a laptop, and the particular focused quiet of someone who has found a problem they're actually equipped to solve. He talked to Darnell, a long call, detailed. Darnell's experience turned into a case study with his permission. He'd researched 3 existing organizations with similar missions, identified where they failed in the delivery infrastructure, and built a model that addressed the gaps. He brought the draft to Vivian on a Friday morning in mid-March. 42 pages, clean, organized, with the specific practical detail of someone who had spent 9 years making logistics systems work. She read it in front of him, which he hadn't expected. He'd anticipated she'd take it and read it later. Instead, she read it the way she read the things that mattered, with full attention, making notes in the margin, occasionally pausing to look at the window and think before continuing. It took her 40 minutes. "The employer partnership tier is the right call," she said when she finished, "making it incentivized rather than purely ethical. The tax treatment structure you've outlined, that's what will actually move companies." "Employers respond to structure," Nathan said. "Give them a framework and a reason, they'll participate. Ask them to do the right thing on principle alone. Most of them will nod and do nothing." Cynical. Realistic. She looked at him. "The intake assessment model, page 23. You've built in a case manager function that doesn't exist in the current vocational rehab system. Because the current system doesn't have it, and it's the biggest single failure point. One person who knows both sides, medical and employment, and advocates for the individual in both directions." He paused. "Darnell had to be his own case manager. Most people can't do that." Vivian looked back at the document. "It requires funding for trained staff. That's the most expensive line in your model. It's also the most important one. You can cut other things, and the program survives in reduced form. You cut that, and you've rebuilt the same broken system with better branding." She was quiet for a moment. "I agree." She set the document on the desk. "This is good work, Nathan." He'd been told he did good work before. In 9 years at Meridian, he'd had performance reviews, had received positive feedback in the particular corporate language of managed expectations. This was different. Vivian Sterling did not say things she didn't mean and did not offer compliments as social lubrication. When she said something was good, she had assessed it and decided it was good. "Thank you," he said. She nodded. She was already turning back to her own portion of the work, the funding structure, the governance documentation, the board conversations. Then she stopped. "I'm presenting the full framework to the potential board members in April," she said. "I'd like you in the room." As a caregiver?" She looked at him directly. "As the operations director of the Vivian Sterling Foundation." He held her gaze. "That's what we're calling it? It's my foundation. I'm calling it that." A beat. "Is that a problem?" "No, You had no ego about naming it after yourself in the first weeks." "I still don't have ego about it. It's a practical branding decision. Sterling Dynamics is a known name in the philanthropic community I'm approaching for funding. The association creates immediate credibility." She paused. "And I built it. I'm allowed to put my name on things I build." "Yeah," Nathan said. "You are." Something in the way he said it made her look at him again, and the look held for a beat longer than the conversation required. "April board meeting," she said. "Be ready." "I'll be ready." Bonk. Spring came to the estate with the slow patience of a season that doesn't rush. The grounds greened in stages. First the grass at the margins of the woods, then the gardens that the groundskeeper had maintained through the winter with methodical care, then the flower beds that Lily had been checking weekly since February with the dedication of someone personally invested in their progress. Vivian had started coming outside. Not every day, not for long, but on mornings when the weather permitted and her pain was manageable, she'd come out onto the East Wing terrace with her coffee and her laptop and work for an hour in the outdoor air. Nathan brought her things when she needed them and otherwise left her alone, which was what she wanted. On a Thursday morning in late March, he was working in the garden, not because it was his job, but because the groundskeeper had a family situation and Nathan had picked up the slack, which was the kind of thing that happened when you stopped thinking of your role as bounded. And Vivian came out to the terrace. She watched him work for a while without speaking. He was staking early perennials against a late frost advisory, the kind of small practical task that requires attention but not concentration, leaving the mind free. "You don't have to do that," she said finally. "I know, Terry's out this week. I could call the service, or I could just do it." He moved to the next plant. It takes 20 minutes. She was quiet. Then, my father used to garden. He looked up briefly. She was looking at the grounds, not at him. He went back to the staking. He was terrible at it, she continued, completely unsuited. He had no patience for things that didn't respond immediately. But every spring he'd go out and make a go of it anyway. My mother thought it was hilarious. A pause. He died when I was 30, 3 months before the accident. Nathan was quiet for a moment. He hadn't known that. That's a hard year, he said. It was a hard year. She drank her coffee. I didn't let myself grieve him properly. There was too much happening with the company, and then the accident, and then everything else. She looked at her cup. I think I'm still not finished with it. He put down the steak he was holding. You don't have to be finished with it on a schedule. I know. She looked at him. I'm not being self-pitying. I've been thinking about what I want the foundation to mean. And part of what I keep coming back to is him. He worked his whole life, and the last 2 years he couldn't maintain his independence the way he'd always expected to. He was proud. It was hard for him. She set down the coffee. I want the foundation to do what wasn't available to him, what wasn't available to me when I needed it. Nathan picked up the steak again. Then it'll mean something real. Most things that mean something real come from somewhere specific, she said. Yeah, they do. He finished the staking. He gathered the tools and carried them back to the shed. And when he came back past the terrace, she was working on her laptop. The coffee finished, the spring morning moving around her with complete indifference to her history. She looked, he thought, like someone building something. The April board meeting was held at the estate. Vivian's decision. She'd offered the neutral option of a conference facility in Hartford and then decided against it, which Nathan understood as a statement about where the power in this conversation would sit. The estate was her territory. The work had been done here. The board would come to her. 4 potential members: a retired federal judge who had spent 20 years on disability rights legislation, a tech entrepreneur who had founded an accessibility software company after his daughter's traumatic brain injury, a physician who ran a rehabilitation medicine department at a teaching hospital, and a former state labor commissioner with deep connections in the employment sector. They arrived on a Wednesday morning. Margaret had arranged the dining room as a meeting space. Long table, good light, the practical setup of a working meeting rather than an event. Nathan had spent the previous week preparing, not just his section of the presentation, but the whole picture. He'd read everything Vivian had drafted, asked questions, understood the funding model well enough to field basic questions if they came his way. He wore a suit he'd bought specifically for this, which had seemed like an unnecessary expense until the morning of the meeting, when he understood clearly that the room required it. Vivian ran the meeting. He had known she was intelligent. He had known she was capable. He had spent 6 months watching her navigate enormous personal difficulty with a stubborn, imperfect, genuine courage that he respected more than he could easily say. What he hadn't fully seen until this Wednesday morning was Vivian Sterling in a room that she owned. She was precise and thorough, and completely unintimidated by 4 accomplished professionals who had come to evaluate her work. She knew her material with the depth of someone who had been thinking about it for months. When the retired judge raised a regulatory concern about the medical subsidy structure, she addressed it with a specificity that suggested she'd anticipated the question and had 3 responses prepared. When the tech entrepreneur questioned the timeline for the employment placement program, she acknowledged the concern directly and then explained exactly why the timeline was what it was and what it would cost to accelerate it. She didn't perform. She didn't qualify. She stated what she'd built and what it was for and what it needed, and she did it in the flat, precise, completely authoritative voice of someone who had built things before and knew how to make a room believe in them. Nathan watched all 4 of them recalibrate. You could see it happening. The adjustment from, we've come to evaluate a proposal from someone in difficult circumstances, to we're listening to someone who knows exactly what she's doing. When she turned the floor to him for the operations section, he stood up and delivered what he'd prepared. Clean, practical, evidenced. He walked them through the case manager model using Darnell's story, anonymized with permission, and watched the physician's expression shift from politely interested to genuinely engaged. Afterward, over coffee, the retired judge said to Nathan, "The case manager integration, is that your design?" "The structural model is. The need for it came from someone else's experience." "It's the right call." We've been watching the gap between medical and vocational rehab create failures for 30 years. She looked across the room at Vivian. She's the real thing, isn't she? It wasn't quite a question. Yes, Nathan said. She is. All four signed letters of intent before they left. Vivian didn't celebrate. That wasn't her nature. She processed, assessed, moved forward. But that evening, after the last car had left and Margaret had cleaned up, and Nathan had made dinner and Lily had eaten and gone to bed in the guest house, Vivian came to the kitchen at 8:30 and sat at the table. He was already there with a coffee. She looked at the chair across from him. He pushed it out from the table with his foot. She sat down. All four, she said. All four. She looked at the table. He could see her working through it, the same way she worked through everything, with the focused, systematic attention that didn't allow for simple relief. The matching grant timeline is tight. We have 6 months to demonstrate the program model. I know. The case manager hire is the critical path item. We need the right person. I've already started thinking about the profile. I can have a draft job description by end of week. She looked at him. You were working on it tonight? I've been working on it since you said all four, he said. That was 4 hours ago. Something happened in her expression that he'd learned to recognize and still found slightly disorienting. The unguarded thing, the thing that existed before she could manage it back under control. It was the expression she'd had in the therapy room in January, the one she'd had on the terrace when she talked about her father, the one that was simply Vivian without the architecture. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. He waited. I know how to build companies. I know how to build this foundation, the structure, the funding, the governance. I know how to do all of that. She looked at her hands on the table. I don't know how to... I've been alone for a long time, in the way that matters, and I've been telling myself that was a choice, that I preferred it, that the people who left proved the preference was correct. She paused. I don't think it's correct anymore. Nathan was very still. I'm not... She looked up. I'm not saying this to... She stopped again, frustrated with herself in the way she got when language wasn't doing what she needed it to do. I'm not asking anything of you. I know what this position is. I know what you came here for, and I respect that, and I'm not... Vivian, she stopped. Stop telling me what you're not saying and just say it. She looked at him. The gray eyes, direct and unguarded in the kitchen light, the woman who had thrown a plate at a wall 8 months ago and had made chamomile notes and had sat in a January bedroom and heard a man say, I see you, and hadn't known what to do with it. I don't want you to leave, she said, not because I need a caregiver, because I... She held his gaze. I don't want you to leave. The kitchen was quiet. The estate settled around them the way old houses do at night. Small sounds, contractions, the ordinary life of a building. Nathan looked at the woman across the table. He thought about Lily saying she watches you too, when you're not looking. He thought about a cup of chamomile tea outside a closed door and a note card on the counter, and the weight of what it meant when someone who had been abandoned by everyone stopped waiting to be abandoned. I'm not leaving, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. You don't know that. You can't know that. I know it the way I know things I decide, he said. The same way I decided to stay that first night. The same way I decided this job was worth doing even when you were throwing your best material at me. He held her gaze. I decide things, and then I hold them. That's how I work. She looked at the table, then back at him. Something in her face was still braced, still waiting for the thing that had always come. He understood she would probably be waiting for it for a long time. That was damage that didn't resolve in a single conversation. Okay, she said. The same word he'd given her on the first day in the study, when she told him everyone left. He recognized it. Okay, he said back. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. Just briefly. A few seconds, her fingers over his knuckles, and then she pulled back and looked at her coffee cup with the expression of someone who had done something that cost them something and was not sorry. He didn't say anything. He didn't make it into more than it was. He let it be what it was, which was already significant enough. They sat at the kitchen table and finished their coffee in the kind of quiet that isn't empty, the kind that has weight and warmth that two people build together without quite deciding to. Outside, the April night moved through the Connecticut woodland, and the estate was full of something that had been absent from it for a long time. Not perfection, not resolution, Not the clean ending of a story that has decided it's done. Just the specific, ordinary warmth of a place where people have chosen to remain. The job description for the Foundation's first case manager hire went out in the second week of April, and by the end of the month they had 47 applications. Nathan noticed the number and said nothing about it for a full day. Then, at breakfast, he told Vivian. 47, he said. She looked up from her laptop. She held his gaze for a moment, understanding what he wasn't saying, that 47 was also the number of jobs he'd applied to in the worst months. The number that had represented a wall he couldn't get through, the specific quantity of his desperation in the fall, that he was sitting across from her now because every single one of those 47 had said no. The world turns strange sometimes, she said. Yeah, he said. It does. They reviewed the applications together over 3 evenings at the kitchen table, with coffee and the legal pads they'd both adopted as their shared working language. Vivian had the framework of what she needed from the role. Nathan had the operational understanding of what the work actually required from the person doing it. Together they moved through the stack with the particular efficiency of 2 people who had learned to disagree productively. She'd hold one back, he'd push for a different one. They'd argue the point until one of them conceded, or they found a third position that neither had started with. It was, Nathan thought on the second evening, watching her annotate a resume with the focused precision she brought to everything, one of the more functional working relationships he'd ever had, which was strange given that it had started with a plate aimed at a wall. This one, Vivian said, sliding a resume across the table. Social work background, 5 years in vocational rehab, and she left the state system to work at a nonprofit specifically because she was frustrated with the gap you described. She looked at him. She's living your Darnell problem, and she knows it from the inside. Nathan read the resume. She's underqualified on the medical side. We can train medical literacy. We can't train the frustration that made her leave a stable government job. Vivian tapped the page. That's motivation you can't manufacture. He looked at it again. Okay, she's in the top 5. She's number 1, Vivian said, which was not exactly a collaborative response, but he'd learned that when Vivian said something was number 1, she'd usually already done the work to be right about it. They hired her 3 weeks later. Her name was Angela Reyes, and she arrived for her first day with a yellow legal pad of her own, which Vivian noticed and Nathan privately found amusing. She's going to be good, Vivian said, after Angela's first week. She's already good, Nathan said. She restructured the intake assessment in 3 days. I know, I read it. A pause. She's better than good. But you're allowed to be pleased about that. Vivian looked at him. I am pleased about it. I know. I'm saying you don't have to contain it. She looked at him for a moment, and something in her expression moved. Not opened, exactly, but loosened. It's a difficult habit to break. Yeah, he said. Most of the good ones are. May brought the first real test of the Foundation's program model, which arrived in the form of a man named Gerald Toms. 54 years old, electrician, spinal cord injury from a workplace fall, 3 years post-injury and still trying to navigate a return-to-work pathway that kept closing in front of him. Angela had found him through the intake referral system they'd built with 2 regional rehabilitation centers. She brought his file to Nathan on a Wednesday morning with the specific expression of someone who had identified a case that mattered and wanted backup. Nathan read the file. He thought about Darnell. He thought about the math of a 54-year-old man with a skilled trade background and limited transferable credentials trying to convince employers to take a chance on adaptive equipment and modified workloads. Has he been assessed for supervisory work? Nathan asked. Not formally. He spent 7 years as a crew lead before the accident, but then he's qualified to supervise the work he can no longer physically perform. That's a different job search entirely. Nathan looked up. Get him the formal assessment and restructure the job targets. He's been applying for the wrong positions because nobody reframed what he actually has. Angela looked at him for a moment. That's exactly what Vivian said when I described the file to her. Nathan paused. You talked to her about it? She came by the program office yesterday afternoon. Angela said it carefully, the way you say something when you're not sure if it's news. She's been coming by, not every day, a few times a week. Nathan absorbed this. The program office was in the East Wing. They'd converted a sitting room that had been functionally unused, close enough to Vivian's study that the geography made sense. What he hadn't known was that she'd started showing up. He found her that evening in her study, working late as usual. "You've been going to the program office?" he said. She looked up. "Angela told you. Was it a secret?" "No." She set down her pen. "I wanted to see how it operated, whether the structure we designed held up in actual practice." "And?" "Angela is exceptional. The intake model needs a refinement in the employment tier. I've been making notes." She paused. "Gerald Toms has a meeting with an electrical contractor next week. Angela set it up. The contractor has 2 supervisory positions open and specifically requested candidates with field experience." She held Nathan's gaze. "He's going to get the job." Nathan stood in the doorway. Outside, the May evening was settling into the soft, long dusk of late spring, the grounds greening fully now. The gardens Lily had monitored all winter coming into something close to abundance. "You built something real," he said. "We built something real." He didn't argue the pronoun. June arrived, and with it a Tuesday morning that Nathan would return to for years afterward, not because it was dramatic, though it was, but because of the particular sequence of small moments that preceded the large one, the way life stacks its ordinary details in front of the things that matter until the thing that matters arrives without warning. It started with Lily. She had a school performance that evening. End-of-year assembly, second graders singing something she'd been practicing in the guest house bathroom for 2 weeks because she thought the acoustics were better in there, which was incorrect, but which Nathan had not corrected because her commitment to the process was genuinely impressive. Lily asked at breakfast if Vivian was coming. Nathan looked at his daughter. He had not considered this question. He should have considered this question. "I don't know, he said. "You should ask her." "Lily, she's never been to any of my school things." Lily said it simply, without accusation, in the voice she used when she was stating something she'd been thinking about for a while. "She's part of our family now. Families go to school things." Nathan sat with that sentence for a moment. "She's part of our family now," said with the complete categorical confidence of a 7-year-old who had decided something and was not interested in having it complicated. "I'll ask her," he said. "Tell her it starts at 7, Lily added. "And there's parking in the front lot, but the side lot is easier. I looked it up." His daughter had researched the parking situation for a person she'd decided was family. Nathan drank his coffee and felt something settle in his chest that was too quiet to name properly, but too significant to ignore. He asked Vivian after Lily left for school. She was at her desk, which was where she always was in the mornings. And when he said it, she looked up with the expression of someone who had not been expecting this particular sentence and was not immediately sure what to do with it. "Lily's school performance," she said. "Tonight at 7. She's been practicing in the bathroom for 2 weeks. A pause. "Because of the acoustics? She thinks they're better in there." Something crossed Vivian's face, the quick, involuntary thing, the expression that appeared before she could manage it. "Does she know they're not?" "I haven't told her. She's very committed to the process." Vivian looked at the desk. She was quiet for a moment, and in that quiet, Nathan could see her doing something he recognized, weighing the public component of it, the logistics, the exposure of being somewhere unfamiliar in the chair, the school gymnasium with its uneven floors, and the particular social complexity of showing up to a child's event as someone who was neither parent nor grandparent, but something that didn't have a clean category. He didn't fill the silence. He'd learned not to. "What time should we leave?" she said. 6:15. "Lily says the side lot is easier." Vivian looked at him. "She researched the parking?" "She did." A beat. 6:15, she said, and looked back at her desk. But the school gymnasium at Eastbrook Elementary had the universal quality of all school gymnasiums. Fluorescent lights, folding chairs arranged in crooked rows, the particular smell of floor wax and institutional air conditioning, parents navigating the space with the specific combination of mild chaos and genuine anticipation that these events always produce. Nathan pushed Vivian's chair through the side entrance, which Lily had been correct was significantly easier. Wider door, smoother surface, no steps. They found a space at the end of a row near the back, which Vivian had requested, and Nathan set the chair brake and sat in the folding chair beside her. She looked at the gymnasium with the focused observation she brought to new environments, assessing, cataloging, adjusting. The chair got looks because it always got looks. Some people were better at not looking than others. Vivian had, over the months, developed an absolute immunity to it that was either genuine indifference or such a polished simulation of indifference that the practical difference was zero. "This is very bright," she said. "School gymnasiums always are." "Is there a reason for that?" "I think it's deterrence against falling asleep during the recorder solos." She looked at him. "There are recorder solos?" "There are always recorder solos." She looked back at the gymnasium with the expression of someone who had agreed to something without fully understanding the terms. The performance was 45 minutes long. It included 3 songs, 2 spoken recitations, a recorder solo by a child named Marcus, who was technically proficient in a way that suggested significant parental investment in lessons, and the second-grade ensemble piece that Lily had been practicing in the bathroom. Lily found them in the audience before the performance started. She came through the side door in her school clothes with her hair in the braids Nathan had managed that morning with moderate success. And when she saw them both, Nathan in the folding chair, Vivian in the chair beside him, her face did something that Nathan was not entirely prepared for. Not surprise, exactly. The expression of someone who had hoped for something and then been given it. She walked over and leaned down and hugged Nathan quickly, then straightened and looked at Vivian with a serious expression. "You came," Lily said. "I came," Vivian said. "I'm in the 3rd row from the left." Lily pointed. "You'll be able to see me clearly from here. I checked the sight lines." "She checked the sight lines," Vivian said to Nathan. "She's thorough," Nathan said. Vivian looked back at Lily. "I'll be watching." Lily nodded, satisfied, and went back to her class. Vivian watched her go with an expression Nathan recognized now, the one that wasn't manageable, that existed before the management could catch it. The expression that was simply a woman being moved by something she hadn't expected to be moved by. He didn't say anything. He watched the performance with her. When the second-grade ensemble started and Lily's voice was audible, not a solo, part of the group, but Nathan knew his daughter's voice in a crowd the way parents always do, he felt Vivian shift slightly in the chair beside him. He glanced at her. She was watching Lily with complete attention. On the way back to the estate, with Lily in the back seat explaining in extensive detail why Marcus's recorder was slightly sharp in the middle section, because she had heard a similar recording on YouTube and could identify the pitch issue, Vivian was quiet in the passenger seat. When they pulled through the estate gate and down the gravel drive, she said quietly, not turning, "Thank you for asking me." Nathan looked at the drive ahead. "Thank Lily. It was her idea." "I know it was," Vivian said, "but you asked." He parked in front of the main house. Lily was already out of the back seat and heading for the guest house, with the energy of a child who had performed and needed to decompress by being in her own space with her rabbit lamp and her books. "Lily," Nathan called. She turned. "Say good night." Lily looked at Vivian. "Good night," she said. Then, after a pause, "I'm glad you came." "So am I," Vivian said. Lily turned and ran for the guest house. The thing about Vivian Sterling's physical therapy is that Nathan had never once allowed himself to predict what it might accomplish. He'd read enough to know the landscape was complicated. Incomplete versus complete injury, the specific vertebral level, the years since the accident, the quality of the rehabilitation program in the early months. He knew the numbers, and he knew that numbers in medicine are averages that tell you almost nothing about the specific person in front of you. He had never, in 8 months, allowed himself to hope for something in particular. He'd been careful about that. Hope in a specific direction was a form of expectation. An expectation was a form of pressure, and Vivian had enough pressure already. The Tuesday morning in mid-June was a therapy session like other Tuesday mornings. Dr. Patel arrived at the usual time, went into the therapy room, and Nathan set about the morning's work in the rest of the house. At 8:47, Doctor, Patel came out of the therapy room and found Nathan in the kitchen and said, "She's asking for you." Something in her voice made him put down what he was holding immediately. He walked quickly to the therapy room. He knocked twice, his code, and opened the door. Vivian was at the parallel bars. This was not unusual. The parallel bars had been part of her therapy for months. Upper body strength, weight-bearing tolerance, the gradual, careful, frequently painful process of working with what remained of nerve function and muscle memory below the injury level. Dr. Patel had been methodical and honest about what it was for, building strength, improving circulation, working with the body's incomplete signals. Not a path to walking, a path to better function within the reality of the injury. What Nathan saw was Vivian at the parallel bars with both hands gripping the rails and her body positioned differently than he'd seen before. Weight shifted forward, bearing down through her arms and her legs. Her legs were beneath her, partially, unevenly, shaking with the effort of something her nervous system was being asked to do that it had not reliably done in over a year. She was not standing. That word implies something solid and stable, and this was neither. She was between positions, lifted partially from the chair, arms trembling, legs responding in the incomplete and imprecise way of a system working around damage, her face set with the specific expression he'd seen in January on the worst night, the jaw and the eyes, and the fierce contained energy of a woman refusing to let something beat her. Doctor. Patel stood 2 feet away, hands ready, watching with the professional attention of someone who was prepared for any outcome and had decided not to name what was happening before it finished happening. Nathan stood in the doorway. Vivian looked at him. "I need you to stay there," she said. Her voice was completely even, costing her something enormous to make it even. "Don't come over here. Don't say anything. Just stay there." He stayed. He watched her work. It took 4 minutes. He didn't count this time. Time had stopped having normal dimensions in the room. And it was not graceful, and it was not complete, and it was not the scene from a film where the music swells and the thing happens cleanly, and the audience understands that a corner has been turned. It was a woman shaking at parallel bars in incomplete and imperfect contact with her own legs, not standing up so much as refusing to stay down, and doing it in front of the one person she had decided she trusted enough to witness it without making it smaller or larger than it was. When she lowered herself back into the chair, Dr. Patel was there. The transfer was careful, professional, Vivian's breathing coming in controlled sequences that Nathan recognized as the discipline of someone managing a very large thing in a small container. Dr. Patel looked at Nathan over Vivian's head with an expression he would not forget. The room was quiet for a moment. "That was more sustained weight-bearing than any previous session," Dr. Patel said carefully. "Significantly more. The nerve response in the left leg in particular." She stopped, collecting herself in the professional way. "This is meaningful progress, Vivian." Vivian was looking at her hands on the armrests. Her breathing was slowing. After a moment, she looked up at Nathan. He didn't say anything about what he'd seen. He didn't diminish it with reassurance or amplify it with excitement. He just looked at her. The woman who had thrown a plate at a wall, who had made chamomile notes, who had sat in a January bedroom and heard someone say, "I see you," and hadn't known what to do with it, who had built a foundation from grief and determination and stayed up too late working at a desk in a house full of people who had chosen to remain. "I'll make the tea," he said. She let out a breath. It wasn't quite a laugh, and it wasn't quite relief, and it was completely, utterly human. "Yes," she said, "do that." The Vivian Sterling Foundation held its first public event in September. Not a gala, not a fundraiser, not the kind of event that prioritized the appearance of good work over the work itself. It was a program launch, an afternoon open to the community, accessible venue designed with the input of the people it was meant to serve. Gerald Toms was there. He'd been in his supervisory role for 3 months and had brought 2 colleagues from the electrical contractor, employers who had participated in the Foundation's pilot hiring program and who were, in the direct way of people who judge things by results, satisfied with it. Angela Reyes ran the program presentation. She was exactly as good at it as Vivian had predicted she would be, and Vivian, watching from the front of the room, had the expression of someone who had built something and was watching it operate without her hands on it, which is what successful building looks like. Carol was there. Nathan had driven her up from Callaway Street, the Callaway Street duplex that Gerald Pitts had eventually sold to a developer, but not before Nathan had found Carol a better apartment 12 minutes away, ground floor, accessible, in a building with a decent super and neighbors she'd already started talking to. Carol had her new medication dosage adjusted, and her hands were better than they'd been in 2 years. And she walked with a cane now, but she walked, and she came through the door of the event space and looked at the room. The professionally designed accessible layout, the people in it, the foundation banner, and looked at Nathan with an expression that said everything she wouldn't say out loud in a crowd. He squeezed her hand. Lily was there too, wearing her best dress and the shoes that finally fit and appointed, by her own declaration, as the official greeter, which she took seriously enough that she'd made a small sign that said, "Welcome," in her best handwriting, and positioned herself near the entrance with the focused professionalism of a 7-year-old who understood that her job mattered. Vivian found her there at the beginning of the event. She rolled up to the entrance and looked at the sign and looked at Lily. "Official greeter," she said. "I take it seriously," Lily confirmed. "I can see that." Vivian looked at the sign. "Your handwriting has improved." "I've been practicing." Lily tilted her head. "Are you nervous?" "About the event?" "About everything. All these people." Vivian considered this with the honesty she'd developed in the months since January, the habit of not reflexively denying things that were true. "A little. It's been a long time since I was in a room this size." "That's okay," Lily said. "I get nervous at school performances, and I'm still good at them." She looked at the room. "You built this whole thing. You're going to be really good at it." Vivian looked at Lily for a moment. Then she reached out and straightened the welcome sign, which had gone slightly crooked. "Thank you," she said. "Not as a social reflex." Lily grinned, the full, surprised by joy grin that Nathan had been watching his whole life. Because she recognized the phrase, because phrases like that become family language without anyone deciding they will. Vivian moved into the room, and Nathan, coming up behind Lily, watched her go. Watched the woman who had spent 14 months in a house that the world had mostly forgotten about, watched her navigate the room with the contained, precise authority of someone who had earned the right to take up space in it. He thought about the first day. The study, the gray eyes and the reading glasses and the 11 seconds of deliberate waiting before she'd looked at him. "You'll leave too." They all do. He thought about how wrong she'd been. How understandably, how completely, how forgivably wrong. Lily leaned against his arm. "She's doing good," she said. "Yeah," Nathan said. "She is." A seat. After the event, after the last guest had gone and Angela had packed up, and Gerald Toms had shaken Nathan's hand with the grip of a man who understood what he was thanking him for, the estate returned to its familiar quiet. Carol had gone back to her apartment. Lily was asleep in the guest house, the rabbit lamp doing its work. Margaret had closed up the main house with the efficient thoroughness of a woman who had been doing this for years and would continue for as long as she chose to. Nathan found Vivian on the East Wing terrace. It was a September evening, the good kind, warm enough to be comfortable outside, the summer refusing to fully release its grip, the Connecticut woodland just beginning to consider the change of color. The grounds were in the deep green of late season, well-tended and quiet, and the terrace light was on, and Vivian was there with a glass of wine she'd barely touched, looking at the property that she'd spent 14 months looking at from inside. He brought his own drink and sat in the chair they'd moved out there in April when she'd started coming outside in the mornings. It had stayed there. Nobody had moved it back. They sat for a while without talking. This had become one of the things between them. The capacity for quiet that wasn't avoidance, wasn't discomfort, was simply two people sharing the same space without needing to fill it. "Gerald Toms told me something," Vivian said eventually. "What?" "He said..." She paused in the way she paused when something had affected her that she hadn't prepared for. "He said that the case manager, Angela, was the first person in 3 years who understood both sides of what he was navigating. He said she talked to his doctors and his potential employers in the same week, and then called him and explained what she'd learned from both conversations." She looked at her glass. "He said it was the first time he felt like someone was in his corner who knew the whole picture." Nathan was quiet. "That's what I wanted," she said. "That specific thing. Someone in your corner who knows the whole picture." She looked at the grounds. "I designed it because it's what I needed and didn't have. I didn't have it after the accident. Nobody had the full picture. The medical team didn't know my professional situation. The board didn't understand the medical reality. Marcus didn't..." She stopped. Everyone had a piece of it, and nobody had all of it. And without someone holding all of it, you're alone even when you're surrounded by people. Nathan looked at her profile in the terrace light. "You're not alone now," he said. She turned to look at him. The same gray eyes, the same directness, but different now. Looser around the edges, the way things get when they've been held very tightly for a long time and finally, carefully, put down. "No," she said. "I'm not." He reached over and put his hand over hers on the armrest, the mirror of what she'd done in the kitchen in April. The gesture returned. She looked at his hand on hers and didn't move. "I have something to tell you," she said. "Okay?" "I've been renegotiating my role at Sterling Dynamics." She looked back at the grounds. "Not the advisory position, the actual role. There are 3 board members who believe the company needs active strategic leadership again, and they've been making a case internally. I've been having conversations." She paused. "Nothing is decided. Nothing is certain. But there's a possibility that what was taken isn't, that there's a version of going back that isn't a consolation prize." Nathan absorbed this. "How do you feel about it?" "Complicated." She turned back to look at him. "A year ago, I would have said it was the only thing I wanted. To get back what I'd had. To prove that the accident didn't end me." She was quiet for a moment. "Now, I don't know if going back is the thing, or if the thing is—" She gestured with her free hand, a gesture that took in the terrace, the estate, the program office inside, the evening. "Both things can be true at the same time," Nathan said. She looked at him. "Lily told me that," he said. "She got it from her teacher, but she's right." He held Vivian's gaze. "You can want Sterling Dynamics back and want this. They're not mutually exclusive." Vivian looked at him for a long moment. "What do you want?" she asked. The question landed with the weight of something larger than its 4 words. He understood she was asking about more than the foundation, more than the job, more than the practical structure of what they'd built. "This," he said simply. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. After 8 months in each other's lives, in the particular daily intimacy of shared difficulty and shared work and shared quiet, the word "this" was large enough to hold everything he meant. She looked at him. He looked back. The September evening moved around them. She turned her hand over under his so that their hands were properly held. "Then stay," she said. "I already told you I'm not leaving." "I know." She looked at their hands. "I wanted to hear you say it again." "I'm not leaving," he said. She nodded. She looked at the grounds. They sat there for a while longer, in the specific warm quiet of 2 people who have found each other through a series of situations neither of them would have chosen, and both of them were, in the end, grateful for. Not because the difficulty was worth it in some clean narrative sense. Difficulty is not worth it. It is simply what happens, and you either find something in it or you don't. But because without the difficulty, there would have been no reason for a man with a daughter and a yellow legal pad to come through the gates of this estate, and no reason for a woman in a wheelchair to finally stop waiting for him to leave. There is something that nobody tells you about resilience. Everyone talks about it as if it's a quality you either have or you don't, a kind of inner material, the thing you're made of, the reason some people get up and others stay down. But that's not what it is. Resilience is not a quality. It is a practice, and like all practices, it requires other people. You cannot be resilient alone. You can be stubborn alone. You can survive alone. You can white-knuckle your way through almost anything alone. But the kind of resilience that actually rebuilds something, that creates rather than just endures, that looks at what was lost and finds what was possible instead, that kind requires someone beside you who knows the whole picture. Nathan Holloway came to the Sterling estate because he needed the money. That is the true and unglamorous starting point. He needed the salary and the benefits and the room for his daughter and the coverage for his mother's medication, and without those material needs he would never have answered the listing, never driven up the private road, never sat in the chair across from a woman who had decided everyone left eventually. He stayed because of something harder to quantify. He stayed because he looked at Vivian Sterling and saw someone worth staying for. Not because she was perfect. She was specifically, evidently, sometimes exhaustingly, not perfect. But because underneath the damage there was a person of genuine substance, intelligent and stubborn, and funny in the dry, unsettling way of someone who has observed the world carefully, and brave in the way Lily's teacher was right about, the way that only exists alongside fear. He stayed because he understood, from his own experience, what it means to be the person who keeps going without anyone keeping going beside them. He had done that for 5 years. He had done it well, and he had done it alone, and it had cost him more than he'd admitted to anyone, including himself. And Vivian Sterling, who had built a company with her hands and her sleepless hours and her refusal to accept the limitations other people placed on her vision, who had lost more in 14 months than most people lose in a lifetime, who had spent those months testing every person who came near her until they left and confirming her worst belief about herself. She stayed too. She stopped engineering the departure. She looked at the man who had sat in a chair for 43 minutes and decided that this specific person was worth the terrifying risk of trusting. They were both wrong to trust each other, statistically. The odds had not been good. They were also both right, which is the thing about trust. It cannot be proven in advance. It can only be extended and then, over time, honored. And what was built between them was not a love story in the simple sense, though it was that too. It was more than that. It was a family assembled from difficulty. A 7-year-old girl who decided Vivian was family before anyone had used the word. A woman who learned to drink chamomile tea because someone left it outside a closed door. A man who had spent years keeping things together alone and finally found someone who could help him hold the weight. It was a foundation that by its first anniversary had placed 34 people with disabilities in sustained employment, subsidized medication for over 100 families, and built an intake model that 2 other states had started adapting for their own systems. Angela Reyes presented at a national rehabilitation conference. Gerald Toms was promoted to senior crew supervisor. The case manager position had expanded to 4 people, all of them carrying the full picture for the people in their care. It was a company, Sterling Dynamics, that had, in the February following the September event, offered Vivian her position back. Not the advisory role, the real one. She took it, and she walked into that board meeting in her chair with the integration framework she'd written and 9 months of foundation work behind her. And she was not the same person who had been replaced while she was in the hospital. She was someone who had been through more and built more and understood more, and the board knew it, and the company was better for it. And it was a Tuesday morning the following spring. Lily 9 now, Nathan 37, Vivian 34, the estate's grounds in the full green of May. When Dr. Patel arrived for a session and afterward came to find Nathan in the kitchen with an expression that had become familiar over many months of good news and setbacks and the unglamorous, incremental, entirely human work of a body rebuilding its own pathways. "She wants you in the room," Dr. Patel said. He went. Vivian was at the parallel bars. This was familiar. The bars had been part of the language of their life for a long time. Nathan had watched more sessions than he could count, had learned to read the difference between the sessions that were building towards something and the sessions that were simply maintaining ground. This was different. He knew it before anything happened, the way you sometimes know things that haven't declared themselves yet. The way the room felt, the way she was positioned, the way Dr. Patel stood back with her hands lowered, not ready to intervene, ready to witness. Vivian looked at Nathan. "Don't say anything," she said. The same words as June, a year ago. "Just watch." He watched. What happened next was not the scene from a film. It was not sudden or clean. It took 7 minutes, and it required everything she had, and it was not stable, and it was not complete, and it was preceded by 9 months of work that had been mundane and painful and unremarkable in the way that real work always is. Vivian Sterling stood. Not fully. Not the standing of a person with an intact spinal cord, not the standing she had done before the Colorado ski slope, and the accident that divided her life into before and after. Both hands on the bars, weight distributed in the imprecise and partial way of a recovering nervous system, the left leg bearing more than the right, her body trembling with the effort of something it was being asked to do that it had not reliably done in 22 months. But standing. Nathan watched her. He did not speak. He did not move. He was the still point in the room, the same way he had been on that January night. The person who stayed, who witnessed, who did not make the thing smaller by reacting to it, or larger by performing his reaction. She held it for 11 seconds. Then she lowered back to the chair, carefully, with Dr. Patel's hands ready and not needed, and she sat and breathed, and the room was quiet. He went to her. He crouched in front of the chair, eye level, which was where he'd learned to put himself in moments that mattered, because it was where they were the same height, the same level, equal. And he looked at her. Her eyes were bright. Not with tears, exactly. With something adjacent to tears that doesn't have its own word. The specific moisture of a person who has just done something they were told might not happen and found out the telling was wrong. 11 seconds, she said. I know. It's 11 seconds more than 0, he said. That's what it is. She looked at him. He looked at her. Between them was everything that didn't need to be said, the accumulated weight of the months, the particular truth of two people who had learned each other's whole picture. She put her hand on his face. Just briefly. The palm against his cheek, the gesture of someone who has been careful about touch for a long time and is choosing not to be careful for a moment. He covered her hand with his. They stayed like that for a moment, in the ordinary therapy room of an estate in Connecticut on a Tuesday morning in May, in the unremarkable and complete quiet of two people who had survived their hardest years and built something out of the surviving. Then she took a breath. "I'll need to tell Dr. Patel the session notes for today," she said. "I'll make the tea," he said. She almost smiled. Not quite. The full smile was still rare, still something she gave carefully and selectively, but almost. "Yes," she said. "Do that." He stood. He walked back to the kitchen, past the hallway where the sconce still occasionally needed its bulb replaced, past the library where Lily came after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, past the study where the legal pads had accumulated over months of foundation work and late evenings, and the gradual, imperfect building of something that had started with a listing on an obscure employment site and a man who was desperate enough to answer it. He put the kettle on. Outside, through the kitchen window, the May morning was doing what May mornings do in New England. The light was the specific gold of a season that has finally arrived. The grounds were full and green, and somewhere in the direction of the garden, he could hear Lily talking to the plants, giving them their weekly update, telling them what she'd had for lunch. He listened to his daughter's voice in the garden and waited for the kettle and thought about what the year had built. Not a clean story. Not the version where everything breaks perfectly and heals perfectly and the people become perfect because of it, but a real one. The kind where people stay, and in the staying, find out who they actually are. The kettle came to boil. He made 2 cups. He carried them back down the hall. He knocked twice on the therapy room door. She said, "Come in." He went in. That was all. That was everything.